I never thought a quiet summer could twist into a nightmare. It began like any other golden July afternoon. Thick, lazy heat soaking into the skin, the kind that makes the world feel half asleep. I was stretched out by the pool, earbuds in, half dozing to some indie playlist. The smell of garlic and butter drifted through the open kitchen window where Mom was making her famous fettuccine alfredo, humming along to the radio. Dad had texted that he was stopping by Redbox on his way home to grab a movie for family night. We lived at the edge of town, on a small cul-de-sac where the loudest thing you'd ever hear was a lawnmower. The kind of place where neighbors waved from their driveways, kids rode bikes until the streetlights blinked on, and nobody ever locked their doors before sunset. It was safe, predictable, almost boring until the house next door finally sold. He moved in on a Friday afternoon. A man in his mid-50s, stocky, with short gray hair and that unmistakable ex-cop stance. Back straight, eyes always scanning, like he was still on patrol even when holding a box of dishes. He introduced himself that evening. "Name's Hank," he said, shaking Dad's hand with a grip that made Dad wince. "Used to be a police officer over in Henderson County. Retired now. Just looking for a quiet place to settle down." Dad grinned, instantly charmed. "A cop, huh? Well, we could use someone like you around here. Maybe keep the teens from turning the cul-de-sac into a rave every weekend." Everyone laughed. Hank smiled, polite but firm, his posture never quite relaxing. He seemed normal enough, respectful, ordinary. For a while. Then I started noticing small things. Whenever I went out by the pool, Hank somehow appeared. Sometimes he'd be watering his plants. Other times he'd be checking the mail or fixing the fence. But even when I wasn't looking directly at him, I could feel it, the weight of his gaze, heavy and deliberate. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe he was just lonely, trying to be friendly. But one afternoon, as I lay stretched out on the chair, sunlight warming my skin, his voice carried over the fence. "Hey there," he called. "You're out here every day, huh? Must be nice being young. You a student or what?" I sat up, tugged out one earbud, and forced a polite smile. "Yeah, starting college soon." He nodded slowly, eyes trailing over me in a way that made my stomach knot. "You on Instagram or anything? Maybe I'll give you a follow." I froze, caught off guard. Nah," I lied. "Don't really do social media much." "Oh, that's too bad," he said casually, and then lifted his phone. "Mind if I grab a picture? The light's real nice right now." Before I could even process the words, the shutter clicked. My smile dropped. Why'd you take that?" He chuckled, awkward but not sorry. "Just testing the camera, sweetheart." Didn't mean nothing by it. I forced a tight grin, mumbled something, and slipped inside. My hands were trembling as I locked the sliding door. My heart wouldn't slow down. At dinner, I wanted to tell my parents, but Mom was glowing about a promotion at work, and Dad was halfway through his second beer, joking about Hank helping him install a new security light. It didn't feel like the right moment, so I stayed quiet. Big mistake. A few days later, I caught him watching me again, this time from his darkened window. He wasn't pretending anymore. He just stood there, lights off, his outline motionless behind the glass, staring straight into our backyard. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but when I told my best friend Carla about it, she frowned, setting down her iced coffee. "That's creepy as hell," she said flatly. "You should tell your dad." I tried. "He won't listen. He likes the guy." "Classic," she muttered. "Old men always trust other old men. You want me to come by sometime? Maybe if he sees you're not alone." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Maybe that's smart." That night I couldn't sleep. My stomach was tight, my chest restless. I sat by the window, staring across the yard at Hank's dark house. Around midnight, his bedroom light flickered on. Curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. Dad had bought me a telescope last Christmas for stargazing. That night I used it for something else. I aimed it at Hank's window. At first I could only make out his silhouette. Then he turned. My breath caught. He was holding his phone, and my picture was glowing on the screen. The same one he'd taken by the pool. He stared at it for several long seconds, unmoving before setting it down beside a small, neat stack of photographs on his nightstand. On top of the pile was the face of another girl, young, maybe 12 or 13. Her smile was small and uncertain, frozen in time. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the telescope. I backed away from the window and sat on the floor, staring into the dark until sunrise. Sleep didn't come. Every sound that night, the hum of the refrigerator, The creak of the ceiling fan made my pulse jump. By morning, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I brushed my hair, made coffee, even joked with Mom while she flipped pancakes. But every clink of a plate, every footstep outside made my skin tighten. Then that evening, Dad called from the kitchen, cheerful as ever. "Hey kid, we're having Hank over for dinner tonight. He's new here, let's make him feel welcome, huh?" I froze mid-step. "Dad, I really don't think what?" He cut in, setting plates on the table. "Come on, be polite. You've been rude lately. What's your deal?" My throat closed. I wanted to scream to tell him everything, but the words tangled somewhere between fear and disbelief. The doorbell rang. Hank stepped in, smiling wide, holding a bottle of wine. "Hope you folks like Merlot," he said, handing it to Mom. "Perfect," she chirped. "Come in, sit down." Dinner was unbearable. Hank talked easily, telling story after story from his years on the force. Car chases, shootouts, arrests that made Dad laugh and Mom hang on every word. I barely touched my food. My hands trembled so badly I kept my napkin in my lap to hide it. At one point, Hank reached for the bread basket and his fingers brushed mine. My whole body jolted. The fork slipped from my hand and clattered loudly against the plate. "You okay there, sweetheart?" he asked softly, eyes unreadable. "I'm fine," I muttered, forcing a shaky smile. 2 nights later, something woke me, a faint rustling outside like someone moving through the trash. I pushed the blinds aside and my breath caught. Hank was in our driveway, crouched by the bins. He lifted each bag carefully, rummaging through them like he was looking for something specific. Then he paused, holding something up to the porch light. My stomach twisted when I realized what it was, one of my used tampons. He slipped it into a plastic bag, glanced around, and walked briskly back to his car. I stumbled backward, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I grabbed my phone. "Me, he's in our trash." Took something. I'm freaking out. "Carla." "What?" "Call the cops." "Me. My dad won't believe me. He likes the guy." "Carla, then tell your mom." "Me. I will, tomorrow." But tomorrow came faster than I could imagine. I woke to shouting. Blue and red lights pulsed across my walls, sirens cutting through the dawn. My heart pounded as I ran downstairs, barefoot and dazed. 2 police cars were in our driveway, and officers were flooding the living room, shouting commands. My parents, my mom and dad, were on the floor, handcuffed. "What's going on?" I screamed, pushing past one of the officers. A tall cop blocked my path. "Stay back, ma'am. Those are my parents," I cried. "What the hell are you doing?" Then I saw him, Hank, standing by the door, pale and tense, his eyes full of something that wasn't guilt or triumph. It was sorrow. He stepped closer. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "Those people, they're not your real parents." The words barely made sense. "What? They kidnapped you," he said, voice shaking. 14 years ago. From Wisconsin. I recognized your face from a cold case database I used to work on." The room seemed to tilt. That's not possible." But his words were swallowed by chaos. The police shouting, my so-called parents screaming that it wasn't true. DNA testing later proved everything. The couple I'd called Mom and Dad had stolen me when I was 4. They'd changed my name, moved states, built an entire life out of lies. And Hank, the man I'd feared, the one whose gaze had haunted me, had been the one who saved me. He'd recognized me the day we met. With no proof, he'd watched quietly, collecting what he needed. Photos, DNA from the trash until he could be sure. Until he could bring me home. The months that followed were a blur of questions and reunions. Meeting my biological parents again, learning my real name, trying to piece together a life that had been stolen before I even understood what life meant. Even now, years later, when the air smells like garlic and butter or I hear sprinklers ticking in the dusk, it all comes back. The summer when everything I believed turned upside down, and the stranger I feared turned out to be the one who freed me. I've lived on Cedar Lane for about 8 months now, and until a few weeks ago I would have sworn it was the quietest street in all of Everett. Nothing ever really happens here, the kind of place where the nights hum with sprinklers and the weekends echo with the sound of kids laughing over bouncing basketballs. I moved here after a messy breakup, chasing some quiet. A small 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a duplex facing the street. Simple, predictable, peaceful, until the girl showed up. It started one Thursday morning. Same routine as always. I was waiting for the Route 27 bus to downtown, earbuds in, half zoned out, scrolling through work emails. The stop was just a metal bench beneath a sun-bleached ad for a dentist with an unsettlingly wide grin. Across the street, a big oak tree threw long shadows over the cracked sidewalk. I remember the air that morning, crisp enough to see my breath, the sun still rubbing sleep from its eyes behind the houses. I was staring down the road, looking for the faint glow of headlights when that instinct hit me. Someone was too close. That prickling awareness crawled up my neck. I turned. A girl stood right beside me, maybe 8 or 9 years old, skin pale as chalk, hair the color of wet dirt, tangled but tucked neatly behind one ear. Her backpack looked heavy enough to topple her over, one strap hanging loose off her shoulder. She didn't fidget, didn't smile, just stared. "Hey, kiddo," I said, awkwardly tugging one earbud free. "You scared me there." Nothing. Not even a blink. Her gaze stayed fixed on me. Then she spoke softly, like she was saying something secret. "You're really pretty." It caught me off guard. I gave a small laugh. "Well, thanks. That's sweet of you." But she didn't move. Her eyes stayed on mine, too still, too calm. Then she tilted her head slightly, her voice even and eerily quiet. "I'm going to rip your face off." I froze. My stomach flipped so hard I almost laughed again, out of shock more than humor. "What?" I said, half laughing, searching her face for any sign she was joking. She just blinked once, slow. "You'll see." That's when I noticed him. A man standing across the street, tall, scruffy, maybe mid-40s, gray hoodie pulled up. He was watching us, not just glancing, watching. I thought, that's her dad. But then the girl's head whipped around, following my gaze. She pointed at him suddenly, her voice ripping through the morning air. "Stop watching me." Her scream didn't sound like it came from a child. Too sharp, too loud, like something straining to fit through her small frame. The man jerked, startled, then turned and ran. Just bolted down the sidewalk without looking back. The girl faced me again. Her eyes were huge now, wide and hollow. Then without another word, she spun around and sprinted after him, her backpack bouncing wildly. I stood there, frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The bus arrived 30 seconds later, sighing to a stop beside me. I climbed on autopilot, fumbling my card, dropped it twice before I finally got it to scan. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. For days afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every detail replayed in my mind like a looping nightmare. The way her voice stayed calm, the look in her eyes, the man running. I even brought it up at lunch with one of my coworkers. She shrugged, poking her salad. "Kids say creepy shit all the time. You ever see those TikToks where they talk about past lives?" I laughed weakly, pretending that explanation settled something in me. God, I wanted it to. Then came last Saturday. I was waiting outside my friend Nate's apartment building, killing time while he grabbed his jacket. The place was 2, maybe 3 suburbs away from Cedar Lane, miles from that bus stop. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and blue, the air smelling faintly of rain. I leaned on the railing, cigarette in hand, scrolling through my phone, half lost in thought. Then I saw her. Same backpack, same messy brown hair, walking down the sidewalk, slow, deliberate steps like she'd been walking forever. My stomach dropped straight through me. No way. She stopped in front of me, looking up. Her voice was calm again, steady and wrong. "You," she said. "I know you." My mouth went dry. Yeah. I think we've, met before. At the bus stop, right?" She didn't answer. Her eyes followed the trail of smoke curling from my cigarette, then lifted back to my face. Her head tilted again, same slow, deliberate motion, as if she were studying me like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She took a small step closer, her sneakers whispering against the concrete. "He doesn't like when people talk to me." I blinked, glancing up and down the street. The air smelled faintly of rain and car exhaust. Who doesn't? The change in her expression was subtle but wrong. Not fear. Something like surprise, confusion that I didn't already understand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The man from across the street." A chill crawled down my spine. "Your dad?" She shook her head slowly. "No, not my dad. He just follows." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My throat went dry. I kept half an eye on the building door, waiting for Nate to come out and rescue me from whatever this was. But she just stood there, motionless, watching me. Her silence pressed heavy between us. Finally, I forced a breath and tried to sound calm. "Look, kid, are you lost?"
Do you need me to call someone?
Her brow furrowed like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she said softly, "He said you'd say that." My heart kicked hard.
Who did?
Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. The corners of her mouth twitched like she was holding back a smile. "You'll see soon." The words hit me like déjà vu, same tone, same calm certainty. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Nate's voice echoed down the steps. "Yo, you ready?" I turned toward him, relief flooding through me. Yeah, 1 sec. When I looked back, the sidewalk was empty. The girl was gone. No running footsteps, no sound at all. Just the faint sway of the trees in the evening wind. That night, I tried to shrug it off. Nate and I hung out, drank a few beers, played video games. But I couldn't shake her from my head. Every creak in the hallway made me glance at the window. Every shadow felt too long. By midnight, I'd had enough and decided to head home. Cedar Lane was quiet when I got off the bus. Quiet the way only small streets get after midnight. Streetlights hummed and flickered one by one, casting uneven pools of yellow across the pavement. I crossed the spot where I'd first met her. My breath fogged in the air. That's when I heard it. Soft tapping behind me. Footsteps. I turned fast, expecting a jogger or maybe a neighbor taking out trash. The street was empty, just the whisper of wind through the oak branches. When I reached my driveway, I saw it. A small pink backpack sitting neatly on my front step. It was the same one. I stood there for a long moment, every instinct screaming, "Don't touch it." But curiosity won. Slowly, I crouched and unzipped it. Inside were a few crumpled papers, some small plastic toys, and a photo. It was a printed photo of me at the bus stop. Same coat, same angle, earbuds in, my head tilted down exactly as I remembered. Only, I hadn't seen anyone taking pictures that day. Across the bottom, scrawled in messy black marker, were 3 words. "You'll see soon." That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the house made my heart jolt. Around 2 a.m. I heard it again, a faint scraping sound from outside my window. I pushed the blinds aside. She was standing under the flickering streetlight, face tilted up toward my apartment. Same blank stare. My breath caught. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. She raised one hand slowly, pointed toward my window and said something. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear through the glass. Against every sane impulse, I unlatched the window just enough for her voice to drift through. Quiet. Calm. Icy. "He's behind you." I spun around, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Nothing. Empty room. When I turned back, she was gone. Weeks passed without a sign of her. I started to convince myself it had all been stress. Grief from the breakup, too many sleepless nights. Maybe I'd imagined it all. But last night, everything came back. I came home from work and noticed the front door slightly open. I could have sworn I'd locked it. My voice shook as I called out, "Hello?" No answer. The air inside felt thick, stagnant. I stepped into the living room and froze. Every photo frame I owned had been turned around, faces pressed to the wall, except one. On the coffee table lay that same printed photo of me at the bus stop. Only now, beneath the words, "You'll see soon," someone had drawn a small black heart. Then, 3 slow knocks at the door. My stomach dropped. I crept to the peephole. No one. But there on the doormat was another photo. This one was taken from inside my apartment. My back to the camera, sitting on the couch, watching TV. That was when I called the cops. They searched, took statements, said it was probably a prank, maybe some neighborhood kid. But tonight, right now, as I write this, I can hear it again. That faint tapping at my window. Every time I glance at the glass, I catch a flicker of movement, a small shadow slipping out of sight. I don't know what she is. I don't know who that man was. But I know this. I should have never talked to that girl on Cedar Lane. Because now every night she comes back, and each time she's a little closer. I remember the exact day we moved into that old house on Red Maple Avenue. It was a chilly April morning, sunlight slanting through bare branches and the air smelled of wet earth and rain. Rachel was already inside, tearing open boxes, humming to herself while our twins, Ben and Logan, 6 and unstoppable, ran circles around the yard, their laughter sharp and bright in the cold. For once, I felt like we'd done something right. I just started working remotely for a logistics company after years of city commutes, and Rachel had picked up a few shifts at the local library. The place was perfect, a big backyard, a detached garage, a quiet corner lot. The neighborhood felt peaceful, the kind of place where people waved and kids biked in the street. We thought it was the kind of home our boys could grow up safe in. But there was something about the back corner of that lot that made me uneasy. Behind the fence, tangled in a wall of wild trees and bushes, sat another house, barely visible, like someone had buried it on purpose. I could just make out the roofline through the branches. I didn't know who lived there, and at first I didn't care. The neighbor to our right, though, Ivan, was another story. He moved in about 8 months later. Mid-50s, maybe older. Heavy Eastern European accent, Russian, maybe Ukrainian, I could never tell. Always in gray work pants and a tucked-in collared shirt, even in 90-degree heat. The first time I met him, I was mowing the lawn. He appeared by the fence, lifted a hand and said, "You new here?" Kind of," I said, cutting the mower. "Moved in last year." He nodded. "Yes, quiet place. Good for children." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "That's what we thought, too." He didn't smile back, just stared, flat, expressionless, and walked away. That was the last real conversation I had with him for months. By June, the twins practically lived outside. We'd bought one of those inflatable pools you fill with the hose, plastic boats and squirt guns floating around. Their laughter carried all afternoon, bouncing between the fences. That Saturday, I was trimming hedges along the back while Rachel was inside making lemonade. Everything felt perfectly ordinary. Then I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Up in one of Evan's windows, the one facing our yard, I saw him, standing perfectly still, half hidden behind the curtain. His face was shadowed, but I knew it was him, watching. The instant I turned, he stepped back, swallowed by the dark. It couldn't have lasted more than a second, but it chilled me. "Hey boys," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Come on out for a bit. Water's getting cold." They groaned, splashing one last time before trudging inside. I didn't want to scare them. I just needed to think. That night, over dinner, Ben said suddenly, "Mom, Dad, there was a light next door. Like a flashing light." Rachel frowned. "What kind of light, honey?" "Like when you take a picture," Logan said. "It came from the top window." My stomach dropped. "You sure?" Both boys nodded. Rachel looked at me, her expression tightening. "You think he was—" "I don't know," I said quietly. "But it sounds like it." She pressed her lips together. "You should go talk to him." So I did. It was early evening, sky orange and heavy with heat. I walked next door and knocked. His car, a faded blue sedan that hadn't moved in weeks, sat in the driveway. I knocked again. Nothing. Rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. Silence. I waited a full minute, listening. No footsteps, no TV, nothing. Just stillness. Finally, I sighed and went home. Rachel met me at the door. He didn't answer? No, but his car's right there. "That's weird," she murmured. "What kind of man hides after being accused of watching kids?" I didn't answer. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that window, the curtain shifting like someone crouched there holding something. Eventually, we stopped talking about it. The twins' birthdays were coming up, Rachel's parents were visiting, and I was tired of feeling paranoid. Then one humid night in August, I heard it, the creak of our side gate opening. I froze. Rachel was asleep beside me, the ceiling fan whispering overhead. Then came the sound again, the gate closing. I slid out of bed. "Jake," Rachel whispered, voice trembling. "What is it?" "I think someone's outside." She sat up. "Oh my God, please be careful." I grabbed my flashlight from the dresser and stepped out the back door. The air was thick and unmoving. The yard glowed faintly under the porch light. I swept the beam across the grass, nothing. Then I turned toward Ivan's place and stopped cold. His back porch light was on. He was standing there. He stepped closer to the fence and said in that heavy accent, "You looking for something?" I jumped, nearly dropping the flashlight. Jesus, Ivan, you scared the hell out of me. Did you see someone in my yard? He shook his head slowly. No one, why? The gate opened a minute ago. Thought maybe you saw... I stopped mid-sentence, deciding to just say it. Look, while I've got you here, my kids said they saw flashes from your window a few weeks ago. Like a camera flash. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? The change in his face was almost grotesque. Eyes wide, mouth twisting down. You accuse me of something like that? I'm not accusing, I said quickly, hands half raised. Just asking, no. You say I take pictures of children. That is sick. You Americans. His voice rose, trembling with fury. You always think you know everything. Ivan, calm down. I didn't mean, but he'd already turned, muttering something in his language before slamming the door so hard it rattled the porch light. When I went back inside, Rachel was pacing by the window, arms crossed tight. What happened? He freaked out, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Got defensive. Yelled at me. Rachel's eyes narrowed. That says a lot, doesn't it? I didn't respond, but inside I knew she was right. 3 weeks later, September came. The nights had cooled, the air thick with the smell of damp leaves. I woke to Rachel shaking me hard. Jake, get up. The boys, listen. I sat up, heart hammering. Then I heard it, the twins screaming downstairs. We stumbled over each other, racing to their room. Ben was standing by the window crying, and Logan was curled up on the bed, trembling. Dad! Ben sobbed. There was a man at the window. There was a flash. My blood ran cold. I rushed to the window, yanking the blinds. The yard outside was empty, silent, but the air felt wrong, like it had just been disturbed. I grabbed both boys, carried them upstairs. Rachel was crying now too, voice shaking. What happened? They said someone was outside. With a flash! Oh God! She pressed her hands to her face. I'll check Ivan's place, I said, already moving toward the hall. I went to the bedroom window that faced his house. It was pitch dark, except for one thing. Upstairs in that same window overlooking our yard, a curtain moved, and behind it, faint but unmistakable, was Ivan's face. He was staring right at me. Then the light went out. I stormed downstairs before Rachel could stop me, flung open the door and ran across the lawn. My fist pounded against his door over and over. Open the goddamn door, Ivan! I shouted, no answer. I rang the bell, kicked the frame, yelled his name until my throat hurt. Still nothing. Finally, I called the police, not because I thought they'd arrest him, but because I wanted something on record. If it ever got worse, I needed proof. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. I told them everything, the flashes, the window, his refusal to answer. They took notes, exchanged glances, then knocked on his door themselves. No response. One of them sighed. We can't enter without probable cause, sir. If you see him again, call immediately. And that was it. We barely slept that night. Rachel made a makeshift bed for the twins in our room. Every night afterward, I sat out on the porch waiting, watching. But Ivan never appeared again. No lights, no movement. It was as if he'd vanished. Rachel suggested we move. I resisted at first, it felt like giving up. But after a week of sleepless nights and that crawling dread that never left, I agreed. Within a month, we found another place 2 towns over. Smaller yard, less charm, but safe. The last time I saw the red maple house was through the rearview mirror as we drove away. Ivan's blinds were drawn tight, same as always. A few weeks later, Rachel got a call from a woman who'd lived down the street from us. Did you hear what happened to your old neighbor? She asked. Rachel's voice was tense. What neighbor? The man next door. Police cars were there all day. Turns out he'd been gone for months. The house was empty, but they found all kinds of weird stuff inside. Cameras, computers, God knows what else. Rachel didn't say a word after that call. She just looked at me, pale and hollow-eyed. We never spoke of it again. Not to the boys. Not to anyone. But sometimes when the twins are playing outside and sunlight flickers against a window across the yard, I catch myself looking twice just to be sure no one's watching. I moved into that house in early September, just before the leaves began to burn with autumn colors. It was nothing remarkable, just a small, one-story structure with beige siding and a narrow driveway that barely squeezed in my car. alongside my girlfriend's battered Honda Civic. But it was ours. For the first time, really ours. No roommates, no thumping footsteps above or below, no paper-thin walls that transmitted every cough or late-night argument. Peace. Quiet. Lena had been my girlfriend for 4 years. We had scoured rentals for months before landing on this place in Cedar Hollow, a sleepy Long Island town where the biggest drama usually involved a diner updating its menu, or some kid making the paper for hitting a home run. Sidewalks were clean, lawns small and manicured, and at dusk couples with leashed dogs would drift through the streets like clockwork. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac with maybe 6 other homes. Across the street, a cluster of trees guarded a county drainage basin. Behind our yard, only one house peeked over the tall wooden fence, the same house that would eventually make me question everything I thought I knew about normal suburban life. The first few weeks were blissful. I worked from home. Lena taught at a nearby elementary school, and in the evenings we sipped cheap wine on the back porch, letting the crickets chorus fill the quiet air. We felt like we'd finally made it, like we were doing something right. It wasn't until October that we noticed them, the kids. It started on a Sunday morning. I was raking the backyard leaves when a soft giggle floated through the air. Not just any giggle, the unmistakable, high-pitched tinkle of a child. I looked up, expecting maybe a neighbor's kid had lobbed a ball over the fence. But no ball came. Instead, I saw 2 small heads, just the tops, peeking over the fence at the back of our yard. They didn't move. "Hey there," I called, half smiling. "You guys lost something?" No response. Just 2 tiny heads frozen like statues. Then, almost in unison, they ducked down as if playing hide-and-seek. I shrugged it off. Kids were weird, I told myself. Later that night, Lena and I were sprawled on the living room couch, the TV murmuring in the background when she froze mid-sentence, her fork pausing in mid-air. Did you just see that?" she whispered, eyes fixed on the back window. "See what?" I asked, leaning in. "Someone. At the window." I stood immediately. The blinds were half closed, but I thought I saw a flicker of movement just beyond the glass. Heart thudding, I slid open the door and flipped on the porch light. Empty yard, no one. Lena stared, pale and tense. "I swear I saw a face," she said. "Probably a reflection," I muttered, forcing calm. "Could have been your shadow." But she wasn't convinced. Her voice dropped to a hush. "Babe, it was a kid." The next afternoon, I was working at the kitchen table with the back blinds open. Around 2, I glanced up and there it was. One of them, pale skin, dark hair, just standing over the fence, staring straight at me. I jolted upright, my chair scraping the floor, knocking the table leg with a loud thud. When I reached the glass door, the figure was gone. That night, I told Lena. She didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it, just nodded, her face tight with confirmation. "I told you," she said quietly. The next day, we walked next door to the house behind ours, the source of the children. It was a gray 2-story building with overgrown shrubs clawing at the siding and a crooked mailbox stamped with faded white letters, their edges chipped by time. We knocked. A long, tense pause stretched out, then the door cracked open. An older woman appeared, probably in her late 60s. Her hair was thin, gray, uncombed, and her face looked like it hadn't felt rest in days. "Yes?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. I forced a smile. "Hi. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We just moved in behind your house. We've seen a couple of kids looking over the fence lately," Lena said gently, trying to sound casual as we stood on the front porch. The woman cut me off fast, her voice sharp and clipped. "There are no kids here. I live alone." We froze. Her eyes darted past us, scanning the street, twitching like she expected something or someone. "Well, maybe they were visiting?" Lena offered cautiously. The woman didn't answer. She just shook her head, muttered something low I couldn't catch, and snapped the door shut. I remember walking away, glancing back once and catching the faintest movement of the curtain in her upstairs window. Just a twitch, a whisper of motion, but enough to make my stomach tighten. The following week we tried to ignore it, but the children kept appearing. Night after night they'd peek over the fence, silent and still. Sometimes when the house was quiet, I could hear faint laughter drifting from the backyard. Lena stopped going outside after dark altogether, insisting she didn't want to be alone. One Friday, I stayed up late for work. Passing the back window for a glass of water, I noticed something catching the porch light. A reflection, subtle but unmistakable. Two small shapes stood by the fence. My stomach dropped, cold and heavy. I flipped the outdoor light on, and in that instant I saw them clearly. Two children, shoulder to shoulder. A boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9. Their clothes were old-fashioned. White shirts, dark pants for him, a faded nightgown brushing her knees for her. Their faces were expressionless, not a blink, not a twitch. Then, as the porch light flickered, they vanished. Just like that. I barely slept that night. The next morning, Lena found me at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee. "I saw them," I said flatly. Her face went pale before I even finished. "What did they do?" "Nothing," I said. "They just stood there." We decided to install motion-activated lights and a camera in the backyard. While setting it up that afternoon, I noticed 2 small handprints smudged into the dirt beneath the fence. Tiny, child-sized, unmistakable. That night, I checked the camera feed around 11:30. Nothing. But the next morning, there was a short 8-second clip from 2:17 a.m. Faint shapes hovered near the fence. No faces visible, but 2 small figures stood side by side, then vanished from view as the clip ended. A week later, screaming erupted from the house behind us. At first faint, then sharp and panicked. Lena bolted to the window. "Oh my God, listen!" It was unmistakable, coming from the Carver house. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. The scream cut off mid-sentence, vanishing into a silence heavier than the sound itself. We waited, no lights flickered on. No one appeared. 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. They circled the property, then returned, shaking their heads. "House looks empty," one said. "No signs of disturbance. Are you sure it came from here?" We nodded, but the doubt in their eyes gnawed at me. Lena called after them. "What about the woman who lives there?" The younger officer frowned. "Ma'am, that property's been vacant for over 6 months. The owner passed last winter. You probably heard something else." Lena's jaw dropped. My knees felt like they might buckle. "That's not possible. We talked to her. We were right there." She answered the door. The officer forced a polite, uneasy smile. "Maybe you met a relative clearing it out. But the house has been empty for a while." When they left, Lena sank onto the couch, pale and silent. I went to the window again, staring at the fence. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the dirt at its base, a small wooden toy car. Faded red paint, 1 wheel missing, the bottom scrawled in shaky handwriting. Tommy Carver, age 9. I haven't seen the kids since that night. But sometimes, standing at the kitchen sink, I feel it. The same stillness, the sense of eyes pressing through the glass. And once, when the wind was low and the night completely silent, I could have sworn I heard it again. Soft giggling from behind the fence, faint and knowing, as if they were still there. Watching, waiting. I moved to a quiet little town called Ridgefield Springs about 6 months ago. It was one of those places where the houses were spaced wide apart, the streets shaded by sprawling oak trees, and strangers waved at you as easily as neighbors. I'd thought it would be perfect for my kids, my 5-year-old son, Noah, and my 3-month-old daughter, Emmy. My husband worked out of town during the week, leaving me to juggle the days mostly alone. That morning, the sky was a flawless, uninterrupted blue, the breeze warm and soft, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. It was the kind of day that practically demanded you step outside. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Hannah. She was heading to Cedar Grove Park with her daughter, Lucy. I hadn't been there yet, but Hannah promised it had fantastic playground equipment, a spacious parking lot, and open grassy areas surrounded by trees. It sounded ideal. I packed snacks and diapers, bundled Emmy into her carrier, and got Noah buckled into his little car seat. When we arrived, the park was quiet, the kind of calm that feels like it's holding its breath, punctuated only by bird song and the occasional laughter of children. Hannah was already there, chatting with another mom, Brenda, who had brought her 2 daughters. Besides us, the only other people present were a man slouched on a bench, absorbed in his phone, and 2 older kids, a boy and a girl who looked maybe 10 or 11. Noah didn't hesitate. He sprinted straight for the slides, squealing as he climbed. Emmy nuzzled against my chest, finally drifting towards sleep. It felt peaceful. Normal. Hannah scooped Emmy up and made exaggerated, silly faces while Brenda talked about summer school programs, her voice low and calm. I leaned back on the bench, enjoying the warm sun on my shoulders. Eventually, the kids began to wander, splitting into smaller groups. Noah's eyes landed on the seesaws positioned a little ways off, shaded under tall trees with a stretch of grass separating them from the main playground. Beyond the trees, a faint construction site hummed quietly, occasional hammering but mostly silence. "Mom," Noah called, his voice bright. "Come play on the seesaw with me." I hesitated, glancing down at Emmy, now curled up and nearly asleep. "Buddy, can you wait a few minutes?" I said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. He frowned and kicked at the grass, the tip of his tongue caught between his teeth. Then a quiet voice cut in beside me. "I can play with him if you want." I turned slowly. The older boy, one of the pair from the edge of the park, stood there, sandy brown hair falling slightly into his eyes. His skin was pale, almost unnaturally so, and his expression was flat, unreadable. He wasn't shy. There was just nothing there, no flicker of emotion. "Oh," I said, caught off guard. Sure. That's really nice of you." He nodded once, a sharp, brief motion, and then walked over to Noah. No smile, no hesitation. Oddly, he had asked me instead of Noah directly, but I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just polite, awkward even. Noah, oblivious, chattered a mile a minute, hopping onto the seesaw. The boy sat opposite him, silent but steady, as if he'd done this 1,000 times. I watched them for a few moments. Noah was unstoppable. Dinosaurs, his favorite YouTuber Ryan's World. The way he planned to leap off the swings like Spider-Man. The older boy listened, completely still, eyes fixed on Noah, and it made my skin crawl in a way I couldn't quite place. The other boy didn't say a word, just stared at Noah. His eyes didn't blink, didn't shift, like he was watching something only he could see. I figured maybe he was just shy and turned back toward the bench, telling myself not to be weird about it. A few minutes later, the man who'd been scrolling on his phone stood up and started walking toward the parking lot. As he passed, I smiled. "Your son was so sweet to play with mine." He stopped, frowning. "My son?" "Yeah," I said, confused. "The boy playing with my kid on the seesaw." The man shook his head. "That's not my kid. He came up to me earlier and asked if I wanted him to play with my daughter. He's just been hanging around." He gave a short, uneasy shrug and walked off toward his car. But my stomach had already twisted into a knot. I turned back toward the seesaws. They were empty. "Noah?" I called, forcing a laugh at first. "Hey, buddy." No answer. A sharp, cold panic hit me. I handed Emmy to Hannah, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped her. "Hold her, something's wrong," I said, already running toward the grassy area near the trees. The distance felt endless, every step pounding in my chest. Then I saw them, 2 small figures halfway to the woods. "Noah and that boy, Noah," I screamed. My voice came out raw. He turned, startled. The boy's hand shot out, grabbing Noah's wrist, yanking him toward the tree line. "Hey!" "Let go of me," Noah shouted, his voice breaking. The sound of fear in it tore through me like a blade. I ran faster, lungs burning. "Hey, get away from him!" I screamed. The boy turned his head slowly, his face still that same eerie blankness, like my shouting didn't register. Then Noah started fighting, thrashing, kicking, his little fists flying. "Let go of me." He smacked the boy's arm and even headbutted him. The boy's expression didn't change, but he released Noah's wrist and bolted into the trees, vanishing between the trunks. By the time I reached Noah, I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I dropped to my knees and pulled him into my arms, holding him tight as he sobbed into my shoulder. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You're okay. I've got you. You're safe." Hannah and Brenda came running, breathless. "What happened?" Hannah gasped. "That boy, he tried to take him," I said, tears spilling down my face. Noah hiccuped between cries. He said he knew where Ryan lives." "What?" I stared at him, not understanding. "He told me he could take me to see Ryan's house. He said Ryan lived back there." "In the woods," his voice cracked. I wanted to go play with him. I looked toward the tree line. The woods were silent, heavy, the shadows unmoving. There was no sound, no trace. We called 911. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes and searched the entire area. They combed through the brush, circled the park, but there was nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no sign that anyone had been there at all. One of them, Deputy Carson, tried to reassure me. "Ma'am, kids wander off sometimes. Maybe he was just another local boy," he said gently, but no one ever came forward. No parent claimed him. No one else at the park knew who he was. That night, after I finally got Noah and Emmy to sleep, I sat in the living room staring at the baby monitor. The faint hiss of static filled the silence. Every creak in the walls made my heart jump. The next day, I went back to Cedar Grove Park. The sun was out again, warm and golden, the world deceptively normal, kids laughing, parents chatting, dogs barking in the distance. I stood near the edge of the grassy field, staring toward the woods. That's when I saw it. Carved into one of the trees, deep enough for the light to catch in the grooves, were the words, "Let's go play." The letters were jagged, uneven, like a child's hand had made them. I left immediately. Later, when I told Hannah, her face went pale. "You didn't know?" she whispered. "Years ago, a boy went missing from that park. They said he was last seen walking toward the woods. They never found him. I haven't been back since. And sometimes, late at night when Noah's asleep and the baby monitor crackles with static, I swear I hear a voice, soft, playful, almost familiar, whispering through the noise. "Want to go see Ryan's house?" I don't talk about this memory often. Hell, for decades I didn't even remember it. My mind had buried it so deep that it took a random evening with my siblings for it to claw its way back. Sharp and insistent. We were all gathered around my sister's dining table, laughing about Dad, the time he locked the car keys in the car while it was still running, or how he spent an entire hour hunting for his glasses when they were perched on his head the whole time. Dad was like that. Funny, kind-hearted, absent-minded in ways that made Mom joke it was a miracle none of us ever got lost because of him. Then it hit me. Not like a whisper or a nudge, but like a gut punch I hadn't felt in decades. This wasn't a funny memory. At first I didn't even recognize it as memory at all, but the more I thought, the sharper it became. The smells, the sounds, the sun on my skin, the way the sand clung to my knees. Every detail came rushing back. I must have been 4, almost 5. We lived in Grayson Cove then, a quiet coastal town near the southern tip of Maine, a place no one outside the state had ever heard of. A diner, a hardware store, one stoplight, and a beach mostly visited by locals. That was Grayson Cove. It started with an accident. I'd fallen at the playground a few weeks before, hit the back of my head hard on one of those old metal slides, split the skin open. I remember the blood, Mom's scream, the way Dad carried me to the ER with a towel pressed against my scalp. 7 stitches. I had screamed, cried, kicked. I'd been dramatic enough for the doctor to shake his head and tell my parents he'd never seen a kid throw such a fit over a simple fix. Weeks later, when the stitches were ready to come out, Dad volunteered to take me. Mom had a shift at the grocery store and couldn't go. I remember the crunchy paper covering the exam table, the doctor snipping and pulling. I didn't cry this time. Determined to show how brave I could be, I sat stiff and silent. When it was over, the doctor smiled. "You did good, champ." Dad's chest puffed with pride on the drive home. "You know what? You earned yourself an ice cream," he said. The afternoon sun baked the car. The windows rolled down, warm wind whipping my hair around. We stopped at a tiny roadside shop called Sweet Pets. I picked a vanilla cone dipped in chocolate shell. The chocolate cracked in tiny flakes that melted on my tongue with each lick. Dad grinned at me and then suddenly had an idea. "You want to stop by the beach for a bit?" I nodded so fast my ice cream nearly fell. Grayson Beach was just 10 minutes away, a small strip of sand tucked behind dunes, driftwood scattered like forgotten toys, a faint tang of seaweed in the air. A handful of kids splashed in the shallows, their laughter rising above the soft rush of the waves. Dad parked and led me down the sand, shoes dangling from one hand. "Stay close, okay?" He crouched so we were eye to eye. "Don't go in past your knees." "I'll be right back. Just gotta hit the restroom." "Okay, Daddy," I said. He brushed my hair from my face and handed me the rest of my ice cream. "You're my brave girl today." Then he turned and walked toward the restrooms near the parking lot. I didn't think much of it. He'd left me for a minute or two before. I was obedient, quiet, happy just to stand there at the edge of the surf, feeling cold water rush over my feet. That's when I saw him. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, standing a little ways down the beach, just far enough that I couldn't make out his face. But I noticed his sun-bleached hair sticking up in messy clumps. He noticed me staring and waved. I waved back. A minute later, he wandered closer, the water sloshing around his legs. The day was warm, salty, ordinary, but something in the air shifted the moment he stepped closer. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, so simple, so innocent, was the beginning of a memory I'd never truly forget. "You live around here?" the boy asked, smiling wide enough for the sunlight to flash off his teeth. I shook my head. "No, my dad just brought me here." He tilted his head, curious. "Oh yeah? You on vacation or something?" "Just a little trip. I got my stitches out today." His eyebrows shot up. "Stitches? What happened?" "I fell on the playground," I said proudly. "Split my head open. The doctor had to sew it up, but I didn't even cry this time." "Wow," he said, sounding impressed. "That's tough." "Yeah," I puffed my chest out a little. "I'm brave now." He smiled again, but it didn't feel like the kind of smile people give when they're proud of you. It lingered too long, tugging at the corners of his mouth in a way that made my stomach twist. At 4 years old, I didn't have the words for it, but something about that grin felt wrong, like he was amused by something I didn't get. "You ever swim before?" he asked. "Sort of," I said, "but I can't go past my knees." "My dad said so." He let out a soft laugh, the kind that sounds friendly but isn't. "Your dad's not even here. I can teach you real quick. It's easy." I hesitated. "I'll get in trouble." He stepped closer, the surf swirling around his shins. "What, you scared or something?" "Thought you were brave." My little fists clenched at my sides. Brave. I'd said it myself. I didn't want him to think I was lying. So I took a few hesitant steps forward. The cold water rose past my knees, then up to my waist. He grinned. "See? That's not so bad." Then he moved closer again. Too close. Before I could react, his hands shot out, grabbing my arms, and he shoved me under. I didn't even have time to scream. Salt water flooded my mouth and nose. The world exploded into silence, except for the muffled rush of bubbles and the pounding of my own heart. I kicked and thrashed, tiny fingers clawing at his wrists. But he was stronger. So much stronger. Through the wavering light, I could see his shape above me. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't even smiling anymore. His face was blank, cold, deliberate. He was holding me down on purpose. My lungs burned. My chest felt like it might burst. I'm going to die, I thought. And then, suddenly, his grip vanished. Strong arms yanked me upward. I broke the surface, coughing, choking, screaming. My dad's voice, raw, terrified, cut through everything. He scooped me out of the water and pressed me against his chest. I'll never forget his face, the confusion melting into horror, then into something darker. Rage. He wrapped a towel around me, patting my back as I sobbed into his shirt. "It's okay. You're okay, baby. You're okay." He said it over and over like he was trying to convince himself. When I could finally breathe, I looked around. The boy was gone. The other kids, too. The beach looked empty, eerily empty, just the wind and the soft crash of waves. Dad stood scanning the shoreline. "Who was it?" he demanded. "Who did that to you?" I pointed with a trembling hand toward the water. "The boy," I whispered. "The blonde boy." Dad's jaw tightened. His face went red. Without another word, he turned toward the parking lot, muttering something under his breath. I think he meant to find the kid or his parents if they existed, but they were already gone. The beach felt different after that. Too quiet, too still. We left not long after. Dad didn't say a word on the drive home. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Every now and then he'd glance at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes wet, his mouth tight. He never told Mom. I know that because if he had, she'd have lost her mind, not just at the boy, but at him too for leaving me alone. A few weeks later, Dad got a new job inland. We moved. I started school. Life went on. The memory faded, or maybe I forced it to. But 15 years later, when I was in high school, we went back to Grayson Cove one summer for a day trip. The town hadn't changed much. Same quiet streets, same salt-heavy air. I wandered down to the beach alone. It looked smaller than I remembered, the driftwood bleached bone white from the sun. And there, near the dunes, stood a man, Tall, lean, mid-20s maybe. His hair was short, pale blonde. He just stood there staring out at the water. Something about him stopped me cold. Our eyes met for a second, and I swear, he smirked. Just barely, like he knew me, like he remembered. Then he turned and walked away without a word. I told myself it couldn't be him. It had been too long. People change, memories twist. But that night I dreamed I was back in that water, my lungs burning, sunlight fading to black. Only this time when I looked up through the ripples, it wasn't a boy holding me down. It was a man, the same cold, blank smile. And now whenever I visit the coast, I catch myself scanning the shoreline without even realizing it, searching for a flash of blonde hair. Because deep down, part of me still wonders if he ever left that town, or if he's still there, waiting for another brave little kid to wander just a bit too far out. I moved into that apartment complex the first week of August, right before the fall semester started. It was supposed to be a clean slate. New city, new school, new life. After everything that fell apart back home, all I wanted was quiet. Somewhere small, manageable, somewhere I could breathe and focus. The place was in a little college town called Maple Bend, about 40 minutes outside Chicago. I rented a room in a 3-bedroom unit with 2 other girls, Sophie and Aaron, both juniors at the same university I'd just transferred to. The apartment wasn't much, but for $600 a month, utilities included, I couldn't complain. The walls were thin enough to hear someone cough next door. The paint peeled in random spots, and most windows faced the inner corridor instead of the street. That meant every time someone walked past, if your blinds weren't shut, they could see right in. Still, everyone seemed decent. The neighbors were mostly students or quiet, older tenants who minded their business. I felt safe enough. That first week, Sophie showed me around, friendly and talkative, introducing me to the landlord's son, Nate, who handled maintenance and warned me which washers wouldn't eat my quarters. Aaron barely spoke, always in her room with noise-canceling headphones, but she wasn't rude. For the first month, things were fine. Between classes and studying, I was barely home. The apartment felt temporary, like a rest stop, and I was okay with that. It started about 3 weeks into September, a Thursday night close to 11. I was getting ready for bed when faint music drifted in. Old pop songs I hadn't heard since middle school. Katy Perry, Avril Lavigne, a few early 2000s hits. I figured it was some frat party nearby. Campus was full of them that time of year. But the sound wasn't echoing from outside. It was muffled and close, like it came from another apartment. I shrugged, threw on my sleep shirt, and lay down with a YouTube video humming quietly from my phone. Just as I started to drift off, a new sound crept in. A sharp, repetitive drilling. I blinked, confused, thinking maybe I was imagining it. I paused the video. The drilling kept going. Seriously? Who the hell's using power tools at this hour? I muttered. It was too late for repairs. I got up, padded across the floor, and followed the noise. It grew louder near my window. When I pulled the curtain aside, I froze. The sound was coming from across the narrow corridor, from Unit 2B. Except 2B was supposed to be empty. Sophie had told me that my first week. No one's lived there for months, she'd said. The last tenants broke their lease. But someone was definitely inside now, using a drill and blasting old pop songs. For a second, I thought maybe the landlord sent a crew to fix something before renting it out. But who works past midnight? By 12, the drilling turned to hammering. Short bursts, then silence, then more pounding. I texted Sophie. Tinder, hey, you hear that? Someone's working next door. No response. Erin's door was shut, her light off. I started recording a short video for a friend back home. You could hear the hammering clearly through the glass with that same bubblegum pop playing low in the background. My friend texted back, for your friend, call the cops. That's illegal, dude. Nobody does construction after 11. Me. Yeah, but maybe it's maintenance or something? Friend. At midnight? Come on. That's sketchy. He was right, but I didn't want to deal with it. I just wanted to sleep. By 1 a.m., the noise still hadn't stopped. My nerves were raw. I tied my robe tight and stepped into the hallway. The flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above me. That sickly yellow hum that never quite went away. The sound came straight from 2B. I stood there for a few seconds, debating whether to knock. Then I noticed the window across from the stairwell, the one facing my room, was open. I walked halfway down the stairs, just enough to see inside, and my stomach dropped. 4 men were in there. None of them looked like maintenance. Late 30s, maybe 40s, in dirty jeans and sweat-stained tank tops, their faces shiny with grime. One held a hammer, another a cordless drill. The strangest part was the room itself, completely bare. No furniture, no tools, no boxes. Just a concrete floor under the harsh white glow of a single dangling bulb. They all stopped when they saw me. The music kept playing, something by Hilary Duff, I think, and it made the moment feel even more wrong. They didn't look startled. They looked irritated, like I'd interrupted something private. Sorry, I said, forcing a shaky laugh. It's just kind of late. People are trying to sleep. Maybe you could, I don't know, do that tomorrow. 2 of them moved closer to the window. The taller one, bald with a greasy beard, tilted his head. You live across the hall? Yeah, I said, my voice catching on the word. He smiled. Not kindly. Pretty voice, he murmured. Say that again, slowly. Another one spoke quietly, and my stomach twisted. Their eyes dragged over me, slow and deliberate, lingering too long. I felt tiny standing there in my robe, half hidden behind the railing. Look, just please keep it down, I muttered, my voice barely steady as I took a step back. None of them answered. They just stood there, still as mannequins, watching me climb the stairs. The moment I turned the corner and they were out of sight, I ran, bolting for my door, fumbling the lock, slamming it shut. I checked it twice. Then I checked the windows. For a while I just stood there, heart pounding, straining to hear. Nothing. The hammering was gone. The music was gone. Silence pressed against the walls like a held breath. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak, every shift of the wind made me flinch. When morning came, I peeked through my blinds. The window to 2B was closed again, still empty, ordinary. Like nothing had ever happened. At breakfast, Sophie shuffled out, yawning. You hear that noise last night? I asked. She frowned mid-pour. What noise? There were guys in 2B, drilling, hammering, playing music. 2B's still vacant, she said flatly, reaching for her mug. Landlord's been trying to rent it for months. Aaron came out a few minutes later, bleary-eyed. You hear anything? I asked her. She hesitated, rubbing her arms. Actually, yeah, Sophie looked up. Wait, really? I woke up around 1. Thought I heard tools or something. Tried to move, but her voice dropped. I couldn't. I stared at her. Like sleep paralysis? She nodded. Yeah, I could hear something metallic scraping. We went quiet for a moment. The coffee machine hissed softly. Probably some maintenance crew came late, Sophie said finally. Don't overthink it. But I couldn't stop. Friday night, it started again. Around 11:45, faint music but different this time. Hollaback Girl, Gwen Stefani. My chest clenched immediately. I didn't need to look, I knew. Chubishman, I texted Nate. Me. Hey, is anyone working in 2B at night? Nate, nah, still empty, why? Like I'm hearing drills, hammering, music, and to run Nate. No way. There's no power in there. We cut the breakers months ago. My fingers froze. Me. You sure? Nate went positive. I'll check tomorrow. I didn't reply. Just sat staring at my screen, the room too quiet. That night I didn't open my curtains. I didn't even move close to the window. I just listened. The music faded around 1. But at 3:30 I woke again. No music now, no hammering. Just breathing. Slow, heavy breathing right outside my window. I held still, held my breath. The air felt thick, electric. Then came a faint shuffle, like shoes dragging over carpet, and silence again. When Nate arrived that afternoon, I followed him to 2B. He unlocked the door, swinging it wide. He was right. The place was spotless, bare concrete floors, dust on the walls, no furniture, no wires, nothing. But the air felt wrong, stale and metallic like old pennies or blood. What about those stains? I asked, pointing at dark smudges in the far corner. Nate crouched, pressed his thumb to one. Probably rust. Pipe leak or something. He straightened, brushed his hands off. Told you no one's been in here. I tried not to think about it. That night I stayed in the living room, earbuds in, pretending to study. Sophie went out. Aaron was gone for the weekend. I was alone. Around midnight I pulled an earbud out to grab some water and froze. The faintest thread of music floated through the floorboards. Kelly Clarkson this time. Since you've been gone." My breath hitched. The sound wasn't coming from across the hall anymore. It was coming from below me. The basement. The door to the storage basement was near the mailboxes on the first floor. I'd never been down there. It was supposed to be maintenance only. But when I reached the end of the hallway, the door stood slightly ajar. A thin strip of yellow light flickered underneath. I hesitated, hand hovering over my phone. Then came voices, muffled but unmistakably male. "Hold him tighter, no, like that." "Shut up. You want to wake her up again?" My chest seized. "Just finish it," another voice said. I stepped back, barely breathing, then the floorboard creaked under my heel. Silence. Then, soft laughter. One voice, slow, deliberate. Footsteps followed, measured, heavy, creeping up the basement stairs. I ran, locked my door. My hands shook as I dialed Sophie, no answer. Then Nate. "Nate," I whispered when he picked up. "Someone's in the basement." "There are people down there." "What? What do you mean, people?" "Men, 4 of them. I heard them talking, or hold him tighter." "Call the cops. I'm coming right now." Before I could, there was a knock at our apartment door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. Another set, harder this time. "Sophie?" I whispered. Nothing. I crept to the peephole. The hallway was empty. But then movement low to the ground. 2 small shapes stood there. Children. A little boy and girl, maybe 6 or 7, barefoot on the carpet. The girl tilted her head, smiled faintly, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then both turned and walked toward the stairs. Calm, unhurried. I didn't move until Nate arrived 20 minutes later with the cops. They found no one in the basement. No men, no kids. But they did find child-sized handprints smeared on the inside of 2B's window glass. The police searched every floor. No signs of forced entry. No one matching my description. They said it was probably squatters who took off when they heard sirens. But Sophie swore 2 nights later, she saw those same kids again standing near the dumpsters at 2 a.m. When she called to them, they ran straight toward the basement door and vanished. A week later, maintenance sealed off 2B and the basement completely. Renovations, they said. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Soft, cheerful pop music echoing faintly through the walls. Always the same pattern. The song starts sweet and nostalgic. Then underneath it comes the dull, steady rhythm of hammering. And sometimes, if I listen too long, I swear I can hear a little girl's voice singing along. I never used to think much about neighbors growing up. They were just background noise. People you waved to when taking out the trash or borrowed sugar from mid-recipe. When I first moved to the small town of Ridgeview, I figured it'd be the same. Quiet streets, polite smiles, maybe the occasional barbecue invite. But I was wrong. I'd been there 3 months when I met the kids next door, and I swear to God I've never looked at children the same way since. I moved into that house on Maple Court in early October. A single-story rental with an overgrown backyard and a crooked mailbox that leaned toward the street like it was eavesdropping on gossip. The rent was cheap, which should have been my first red flag. The landlord, Mr. Tully, said it was because the last tenants left in a hurry. He laughed after saying it, but the sound cut off too quick, like he'd remembered something he shouldn't. My name's Rachel. I was 28 then, freshly divorced and desperate to start over. My old apartment in the city felt like a cage full of echoes from a life I didn't want anymore. Ridgeview was supposed to be quiet. Somewhere people said morning without meaning anything more. The first week was peaceful. I worked remotely for a small marketing firm, so I rarely left the house except for groceries or evening walks. That's when I first saw them, the kids next door. It was a Sunday afternoon, the air crisp with that sweet rot of fallen leaves and chimney smoke. I was raking when I heard laughter. Not the wild, sudden kind kids usually make, but steady, synchronized, almost rehearsed. I looked over the fence. 2 kids stood there, maybe 8 or 9. A girl with dark curls tied messily, wearing a faded pink sweater, and a boy in a red hoodie 2 sizes too big. They stood perfectly still, side by side, just watching. Hey there, I said, lifting a hand. They didn't answer, just smiled. Finally, the girl spoke. "You live here now?" "Yeah," I said. "Just moved in last week." The boy tilted his head, his grin too even. "You gonna stay long?" Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I think so, I said, trying to sound light. I like it here. They exchanged a glance, then looked back at me and said together, "That's good." And without another word, they turned and walked toward their house. It looked almost identical to mine, but older. White paint peeling, a yellow tricycle half buried in leaves, curtains drawn tight across every window. Later that evening, while washing dishes, I froze mid-rinse. Under the glow of my porch light, the two kids stood again, right by my fence, side by side, staring through the kitchen window. I pushed open the back door. "Hey," I called, forcing calm into my voice. "It's late. You should go home." They didn't move. The boy's smile didn't falter. The girl's mouth twitched like she wanted to speak, but instead, they turned and slipped away into the dark gap between our houses. I stood there gripping the dish towel, heart hammering for reasons I couldn't name. The next morning, I mentioned it to the mailman. His name was Frank, an older guy who always wore a Ridgeview Little League cap. "Those the Miller kids?" he asked, glancing toward their house. "Yeah, they're odd ones. Don't go to school anymore, far as I know." "They don't?" I frowned. "Why not?" He shrugged. "Their mom keeps to herself. Folks don't see much of her." I thanked him, but his words stuck. By the end of the week, strange things started piling up. My garbage cans were always moved from the curb, never knocked over, just neatly pushed back against the fence. My porch light flickered every few nights between 2 and 3 a.m., even after I changed the bulb. One morning, I found a small, muddy handprint on my back door. I told myself it was just local kids being curious. I almost believed it. Almost. One evening, I was on a Zoom call with my coworker Tina, going over ad copy, when I heard a faint tapping in the living room. Not loud, just soft, rhythmic. I muted my mic. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. I got up and walked to the window. The tapping stopped. Through the glass, I saw movement in the yard. Two small shapes darting behind the bushes. I stepped onto the porch. The air was sharp with cold. "All right, you two," I said, forcing a laugh. Not funny. A voice floated from the side of the house. We weren't trying to be funny. The boy's voice. "Then what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. The girl peeked out from behind the bush. "You left your light on," she said. I blinked. "What light?" "In your bathroom," the boy replied. "We can see it from our window." A chill crept up my spine. My bathroom window was frosted glass, barely visible from the street. How could they even notice that? "Okay," I said finally. "Thanks for letting me know. But you should go home now." They didn't move. They just stood there, watching. His face was blank now. The boy said he doesn't like it when the lights stay on too long. "Who?" I asked before I could stop myself. "The man who lives between the houses," the girl whispered. Then they both turned and ran, vanishing into the dark. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every shifting shadow made me flinch. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a faint dragging sound outside my bedroom window. Something scraping against the siding, slow and deliberate. I pulled the curtain back an inch. Nothing. Just the yard, silver and empty under the moonlight. But the next morning, when I went out, 3 deep scratches scarred the wall below that window. They looked carved, like someone had used a key or a nail. 3 long, frantic lines etched into the paint. A week later, I finally met their mother. I was getting the mail when she stepped out of her house barefoot, wearing an oversized gray hoodie and pajama pants, though it was nearly noon. Her hair hung in greasy strands and her eyes were sunken, ringed with exhaustion that made my stomach twist. "Hi," I said carefully. "I'm Rachel. I live next door." She blinked, slow, like my words had to travel a long way to reach her. "Oh, you're the new one." "Yeah, I met your kids the other day. They seem sweet." Her lips tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. "They're fine," she said flatly. "They keep to themselves." Before I could respond, she turned and slipped back inside. No small talk. No neighborly warmth. Just gone. That same evening, I saw something I still can't explain. I was making tea around 9 when I glanced out my kitchen window. Their house was dark, except for a faint glow in an upstairs room. The girl stood there, pressed against the glass, her face pale in the light. She was holding something, a stuffed rabbit maybe, but her expression was wrong. She wasn't looking out, she was looking down, directly at me. I stepped back, my mug clinking against the counter. Then something moved behind her, a tall shape, much too tall to be a child. The light blinked out. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I told the officer, Deputy Harris, that I was worried about the kids. I mentioned the scratches, the late-night visits, the strange things they'd said. He jotted notes, his pen scratching lazily. "Ma'am," he said finally, "we've done welfare checks at that address before. Kids are homeschooled. Mother's protective. We've never found anything concerning." "So that's it?" I asked, my voice rising. "You're not even going to check again?" He sighed. "Unless there's evidence of abuse or danger, my hands are tied. But if you see something specific, anything physical, you call us right away. Understood?" I nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe a word of it. That night, I left every light on in the house. Around 2:15 a.m., the doorbell rang. The sound hit me like a jolt. I nearly spilled my tea. Who the hell rings a doorbell at that hour? It rang again. I crept to the peephole. The girl stood there alone, face pale and streaked with tears. I unlocked the door and opened it just an inch. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" She looked up at me. "He's mad," she whispered. My skin prickled. "Who?" "The man between the houses." I swallowed hard. "Do you want to come in? I can call your mom." Before she could answer, a sharp, shrill whistle cut through the night from somewhere outside. The girl's face drained of color. "I have to go," she said, stepping back. He said no talking. "Wait." I started, but she was already running, disappearing into the shadows. The next morning, I went to check on them. Their front door was slightly open. I knocked. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the still air. "It's Rachel." No response. The house smelled stale, mold, dust, and something faintly metallic. Boxes and old toys cluttered the floor. Drawings were taped to the walls. Crude sketches of tall, thin figures standing between two houses, faces scribbled out in thick black crayon. "Hello?" I called again, my throat dry. Then came the sound of slow footsteps upstairs, one then another, steady and deliberate. I froze at the bottom of the staircase. "Hello?" I said again, my voice trembling. A door creaked open at the top. The boy stood there holding a small flashlight, its beam flickering. "She's not here," he said softly. "Where's your mom?" He tilted his head. "She went outside last night." My stomach turned to ice. "Did she come back?" He shook his head, then whispered, "You should go home now. He doesn't like visitors." That was the last time I saw them. 2 days later, the Miller house was empty. Curtains open, lights off, silent. No one saw them leave. Even Frank, the mailman, hadn't noticed a thing. Their car was gone too. A week after that, a for rent sign appeared in the yard. It's been 3 years since then. I still live in Ridgeview, though I've thought about leaving more times than I can count. Sometimes I catch myself staring at that house. It's still empty. The tricycle's still there, rusted, half buried in weeds. And sometimes, when the wind's just right, I hear laughter. Not the kind that makes you smile, the kind that crawls under your skin. And just before dawn, when the light is gray and thin, I sometimes see them, 2 small figures standing between the houses, watching, waiting. And if I look too long, I swear I see something taller standing behind them. I was 8 when everything started. We lived in Easton Grove, a tiny stretch of southern Illinois that barely showed up on maps unless you were specifically looking to get lost. Dirt roads stretched like veins into the surrounding fields. One lonely grocery store sat near the town center. A couple of gas stations dotted the main road, and everyone else kept their noses in their own business, maybe a little too much. Mom worked nights at a diner off Route 13. She had this tough, practical streak, but beneath it she was gentle, always smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla lotion, like she carried warmth in her skin. Dad was the opposite. Mean, unpredictable. He could walk through the door grinning one night and the next bring home a broken bottle with a temper to match. Our house sat at the very edge of a cul-de-sac, staring out at a cornfield that stretched endlessly. Next door lived the Maddens. 2 kids, Billy Ray my age and Lacey 6. Jolene, their mom, was quiet, always baking something sweet that left the entire block smelling of cinnamon and sugar. Earl, their dad, was a man people whispered about but never confronted. Construction worker, bald, huge hands, permanent scowl. When he yelled, the sound could cut through our closed windows, seeping into our kitchen like a dark fog. That's the way of small towns. You hear everything, but you say nothing. It was late summer, 2003. I remember because it was the first time I felt, deep in my gut, that something was off before anything actually happened. That afternoon, Billy Ray and I had been racing bikes along a narrow dirt path behind the cornfield, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the rows of corn. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead and glancing over his shoulder every few minutes. "You okay, man?" I asked. He shrugged, forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." But I knew he wasn't tired. There was something twitchy, restless behind his eyes, like he was bracing for some storm he could already sense coming. Later that evening, Mom left for her shift. She kissed my forehead, kissed Dad's cheek as he slumped on the couch with a half-empty bottle of Jack beside him, and told me to stay inside, lock the doors. I flicked on the TV, cartoons flickering across the room when I heard it, shouting outside. I peeked through the blinds. The Madden's porch light cast sharp shadows, and I saw Earl pacing, yelling. Jolene's hands raised in a vain attempt to calm him. Then with a sickening crack, he slapped her. She stumbled backward into the railing. I froze. Even at 8, I knew that wasn't normal. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to run for Dad, but that part of him that should have been a protector didn't exist. Billy Ray appeared in our doorway then, barefoot, clutching Lacey's small hand. Their eyes were wide, wet with fear. I opened our front door before thinking. "Come in." "Quick," I urged. They ran across the porch, Lacey's soft sobs breaking the quiet. I locked the door behind them and guided them to the kitchen. "You guys okay?" I asked. Billy Ray nodded, his voice cracking. He's going to kill her!" My chest tightened. I couldn't speak. I just knew we had to do something. "Call Mom," I urged them. "She'll know what to do." I grabbed the landline and dialed the number stuck on the fridge. 2 rings. Then her voice, low and tired, came through, the clatter of dishes faint in the background. "Hello, Mom," I whispered. "It's me. Billy Ray and Lacey are here. Their dad..." A sudden deafening bang outside cut me off, followed by a silence that roared in my ears. I dropped the phone. For what felt like forever, none of us moved. Lacey's soft sobs were the only sound. Then came the heavy footsteps on our porch. Slow, deliberate. "Billy," a deep, chilling voice called. "Lacey, come on out now." It was Earl. Billy Ray grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in tight. "Don't answer," he hissed. The door handle rattled once, twice, then a sharp, violent knock that made me flinch. "Open the damn door, boy," a voice growled. My dad stirred on the couch, mumbling something incoherent. "What the hell's going on?" he slurred, rubbing his eyes. He stumbled toward the hallway, and before I could stop him, his hand was on the doorknob. "What do you want?" Dad's voice shook slightly, thick with liquor. Earl stood there, face red, eyes wild, his right hand bleeding, the left hidden behind his leg. "Your kid's got something that's mine," he said, quiet but heavy. Dad squinted. "The hell are you talking about?" Earl didn't answer. He just stepped forward, and that's when I saw it, a hammer gleaming dimly in his hand. Everything after that blurred, like I was trapped inside a nightmare. Dad swung first, a clumsy punch that caught Earl square in the jaw. The hammer clattered to the porch and they collided, grappling like wild animals. "Run!" Billy Ray screamed. I grabbed Lacey's small hand and bolted down the hallway toward the back door. The cool air hit us like a slap, dirt and grass clinging to our bare feet. I turned just in time to see Earl shove Dad against the house and raise the hammer again. The sound it made, I can still hear it in my bones. We ran toward the cornfield, barefoot, crying, lungs burning. The night smelled of damp earth and gasoline, the darkness heavy and suffocating. Yelling followed us, echoing between the rows of corn. Then another thud. Then silence. We didn't stop until we reached the old irrigation shed at the far edge of the field. I pulled Lacey inside, shutting the door and pressing my back against the wood, trying to quiet the frantic pounding of my heart. Billy Ray was trembling violently. We have to go back for Mom," he whispered. "She's gone, Billy," I said, the words tasting wrong, bitter. I didn't know why I said it. I just knew. We stayed in that shed until sunrise, clinging to each other in the shadows. When the sirens finally cut through the night, we stepped out slowly, hands raised like criminals, eyes wide and hollow. The cops found Earl's truck still idling in the driveway. Jolene was gone. Dad lay on the kitchen floor, alive but barely, eyes glassy, skin pale. Earl was found an hour later, sitting at the edge of the cornfield, the hammer still in his lap. He didn't even flinch when they approached. They called it a crime of passion. That phrase has always haunted me. There's no passion in smashing someone's skull in front of their children, only hate. Billy Ray and Lacey went to live with their aunt in Wisconsin. I never saw them again. Sometimes when I drift half asleep, I still hear Lacey's quiet, broken whisper, asking if her mom would ever wake up. Dad survived, but he never came back the same. He stopped drinking. He barely spoke. For years, I thought he blamed me for opening that door. Sometimes I think he did. He died in his sleep when I was 21. I didn't cry. When I turned 30, I finally started therapy. Nightmares had haunted me for years, the same one over and over. Back in that house, the porch light flickering, the hammer echoing through the walls. I ran, but the cornfield never ended. My therapist said trauma doesn't just live in your head, it lives in your body and your bones. That's why, even now, every 4th of July, fireworks make me flinch, the way I did as that 8-year-old kid hiding in the shed. A few months ago, I drove back to Eason Grove. The houses looked smaller. The fields had been cleared for a strip mall, but the old irrigation shed still stood, rusted, half collapsed. I parked and just stood there. The air was thick and humid. Somewhere a dog barked, and for the first time in decades I let myself cry. Not for me. Not for Dad, but for Billy Ray and Lacey, the kids who never had a normal childhood. Because deep down I've always known, that night wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. It stole something from all of us. And some sounds like a hammer striking wood never fade. I was 9 years old when it happened, back in the fall of 2014. I lived in a quiet little town called Maple Hollow, the sort of place where everyone knew your name and nothing ever seemed to change. Life had a rhythm, predictable and safe. My name's Jake Lansing, and I went to Cedar Hill Elementary, just 2 blocks from our house. Days were ordinary, almost dull in their routine. But that year something new had gripped the internet. Slender Man. Creepy drawings, strange games, rumors swirling like fog. Every kid at school knew the stories. At recess we dared each other to summon him in the bathroom mirror, whispering his name like it might make him appear. Some kids claimed they'd seen him in the woods behind the school. I never believed it, not fully. It was just a thrill. A conversation starter while we traded Pokemon cards, waiting for the bell to ring. But one weekend in late October, everything changed. Not in the way of a spooky story you could laugh off later, but in the way fear burrows into your chest, leaving you awake at night, listening for things that may or may not exist. It began with a dream. That Saturday, my mom had taken me to the new McDonald's across town, the one near the highway, bigger than the old one on Main Street. Dad was stuck at the lumberyard working a double, so it was just the 2 of us. I remember it so vividly. The smell of fries, the low hum of conversation, the laughter of kids running through the play place. I had a Happy Meal, chicken nuggets and a small Sprite, and we sat in a booth by the window. Mom was scrolling through Facebook on her phone, occasionally chuckling at something, and I was staring outside, watching the clouds drift in strange, jagged shapes. The sky had this weird gray-orange glow, like the world had been filtered through something unnatural. "Mom, look at that," I said, pointing. "It's like everything's off." She glanced up, smiled faintly. "It looks like rain's coming, Jake." Across the room, a man sat alone. He was tall, too tall, and wore a long black trench coat with a fedora tilted low over his face. I didn't see him eating. A coffee cup sat untouched before him. Every few minutes I caught myself looking back, and I swear he was staring right at me. Just sitting, watching, unmoving. We left shortly after. Mom didn't notice him at all, but I couldn't stop looking back as we walked to the car. He hadn't moved. He was still there, unmoving, staring. That night I had the worst nightmare of my life. I was back in the McDonald's, but it was empty. silent, and the lights flickered, throwing grotesque shadows across the tiled floor. I stood near the counter, heart hammering. The soda machine behind me hissed sharply, making me jump. Then I saw him, the tall man. Only he wasn't wearing a coat or a hat anymore. He had no face, just smooth, pale skin where a face should have been. His arms were impossibly long, dangling like ropes at his sides. He stood in the hallway leading to the bathrooms, blocking the exit. I couldn't move. My legs felt fused to the floor. Then he started toward me, slow, deliberate steps. His head tilted slightly as if studying me, though there were no eyes to see. I spun and ran, diving into the play place. But the tunnels were wrong, warped, twisted. The slides stretched into endless black tubes leading nowhere. I screamed, the sound swallowed by darkness, and that's when I woke up. Sweat-drenched, heart hammering like a drum, I sat upright. The red glow of the digital clock read 2:30 a.m. I couldn't breathe properly, my chest tight, my mind racing with the image of that faceless man. And even then, half awake in my quiet room, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I got out of bed and tiptoed to my parents' room. I hadn't done that in years, but something about that night made me feel small and vulnerable. My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Mom, I had a bad dream. Can I sleep here?" Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep. She gave a soft nod and scooted over, making space. I curled up on the floor between the bed and the dresser with an old blanket, trying to feel safe. My dad's steady snoring and Mom's rhythmic breathing helped, just a little, as I started to drift back into sleep. Then the fire alarm screamed to life. Not a timid beep or chirp. This was a full-on shrill siren that tore through the quiet of the house. My dad shot upright, nearly hitting the nightstand. "What the hell?" he muttered, fumbling for the flashlight. They rushed through the house, checking the kitchen first. Oven off, no smoke, no smell of burning wires. Room by room they searched, nothing, no fire, no danger. Just the relentless blaring alarm for no apparent reason. It took them a full minute to reset it. When they finally returned, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching my blanket like armor. Mom touched my forehead gently. "You okay, honey?" "Yeah," I whispered, my voice shaky. I dreamed about the tall man again." She frowned. "Tall man?" I didn't answer. How could I explain that the man from my nightmare looked exactly like the one at McDonald's that afternoon? They muttered something about a malfunction. Old wiring maybe, but in the 10 years we'd lived there, the alarm had never gone off randomly. The next day, things only got stranger. I stayed home, too nervous to go anywhere. Every time I passed a window, it felt like someone was watching me. Once I paused at the blinds and swore I saw a figure across the street, standing near the lamppost. When I looked again, he was gone. Around 6 that evening, Dad suggested we pick up dinner. I begged him not to go back to that McDonald's. Why not? "You love their nuggets," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Please," I said, my voice urgent. "Anywhere but there." So we went to Burger King instead. That night, sleep was impossible. I kept the lamp on and curled in bed, trying to drown the silence with Mario Kart on my DS. But sometime after midnight, the room became icy cold, the air sharp and biting like frost. No alarm this time. Instead, the hallway light flickered on by itself. I froze, staring at the crack beneath the door. Then I heard them, footsteps, soft, deliberate, intentional. My hand trembled so badly I dropped the DS. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom. My chest tightened. The door creaked open slowly. I screamed, a raw, instinctual scream, and my parents rushed in seconds later. But when the lights came on, the door was wide open and no one was there. After that, things seemed to settle, though the feeling never really left. The alarm stayed silent. The light stopped flickering, and I eventually returned to my own bed, always leaving the hallway light on. But a part of me still felt watched, a lingering unease that I could never shake. Years later, I looked up that McDonald's. It had closed permanently in 2017. Rumors persisted, lights malfunctioning, a child going missing in the play place for 20 minutes only to be found trembling under a slide, employees quitting after reporting a tall man standing near the bathroom hallway. I never told anyone, but I know what I saw. That night when I dreamed of him and the alarm blared, I think he came through. He followed me home. And even now, part of me can't help but wonder if he's still waiting. I never imagined a part-time job at McDonald's would leave a mark on me so deep it lingered into adulthood. But that's exactly what happened. My name's Ela, and I was 17 at the time. I had just gotten my driver's license and started working at the McDonald's just 5 minutes from my house, in a quiet suburb outside Dayton, Ohio. It wasn't exactly my dream job, far from it, but it paid easy money, and I needed to save for college. I mostly worked evening shifts after school, sometimes late nights on weekends if someone called out. The staff was mostly other high school kids, like me, with a few single moms who somehow balanced work and family with more grace than I could imagine. They treated us like we were part of their own small family. The manager, Mrs. Parker, was in her 50s, a classic no-nonsense type. But she had a soft side if you did your work right. I should also mention my grandmother, whom we all called Lola. She spent most of her life working for a wealthy family in upstate New York. She loved telling us chilling stories about the old mansion she worked in, doors that creaked on their own, heirlooms that shifted when no one was around, mirrors that reflected faces that weren't there. We always assumed she was exaggerating. I certainly did, at least until that night. The McDonald's I worked at wasn't the bustling downtown kind. It was tucked into a small strip mall between a pharmacy and a laundromat. Most nights were slow. A few high school kids hanging out in the booths, the occasional drive-through order. The lobby closed at 11 p.m., but on weekends the drive-through stayed open until midnight. We'd lock the front doors, turn off the lobby lights, and finish cleaning the kitchen while the drive-through crew stayed back. That Saturday night, there were 4 of us on shift. Me, Travis on the grill, Rema on drive-through, and Carla, who usually did prep and the register. Mrs. Parker had called out earlier. Her grandson had a fever, so Carla was left in charge. From the start, something felt off. It started small. Around 10:45, our last dining customers, a teenage couple, left without finishing their fries. I was wiping down the tables near the window when I noticed her. A woman standing at the entrance. She didn't knock, didn't push the door, just stood there. She had long, dark hair, pale skin, and wore a heavy tan coat, the kind you'd expect an elderly woman to wear in the dead of winter. The problem? It was early September and it was still warm that night. I nudged Carla. Someone's at the door. She peeked over the counter, squinting. Drive-through. Ignore her. Probably waiting for someone. I nodded but couldn't shake the feeling. She was staring through the glass, completely still, like a mannequin. 10 minutes passed. She was still there. Then another appeared. Same coat, same blank stare. Side by side, they didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even glance at each other. They just stared at me. I walked to the kitchen where Travis was scraping the grill. "Hey, man.
Have you seen them?
He leaned over to peek. "Damn, that's creepy. Think it's a prank?" "I don't know," I muttered. "They've been standing there a while. Maybe they want food," Rema suggested from the drive-through window. I waved toward the window, mouthing drive-through, but they didn't acknowledge me. No blink, no movement, no sign they'd even registered me. By 11:05, Carla told me to start stacking chairs while she counted the till. I grabbed a chair near the door and then I heard it, the unmistakable click of the front door unlocking. I froze. That door was supposed to be locked. No one should have had the key except Carla and Mrs. Parker. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. "Carla, did you—" "I didn't touch it," she said, her voice tighter than usual. Her eyes darted to the door, but she didn't move. I glanced back at the windows. They were gone. Just gone. The chairs in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. And then I heard it again. Soft, deliberate footsteps inside the lobby moving toward the counter. I could feel my stomach drop, every instinct screaming that something was very wrong. "Travis," I whispered. "They're inside." He froze, spatula in hand, eyes wide. "No, that's impossible." I locked it, but the sound kept coming. Slow, measured steps echoing against the tiles. And then I saw her, a shadow moving just past the counter. 2 of them. Not like humans. Not quite. Their faces were empty, but their eyes, if you could call them that, seemed to pierce straight through me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The air had changed. Thick, heavy, like the calm before a storm, but colder, louder, filled with something unnameable. And then Carla's voice cut through the tension, shaking. "We need to get out now." I grabbed her arm, trembling. The door, the window, it didn't matter. Those figures were already there in the room, staring at us like predators who had been waiting a long time for their prey. "Parker, did you just unlock the door?" I called out, my voice shaking. Carla looked up from the register, startled. "What? No!" I turned just in time to see the door swing open on its own. The two women stepped inside. No creak, no squeak from the hinges, nothing. Just the soft tap of their shoes on the tile, steady and deliberate. Rema poked her head out from the kitchen. Did you let them in?" "No," I snapped. They walked straight toward me. My legs faltered and I stumbled behind the counter as Carla stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "You'll need to go through the drive-thru," she said firmly. The taller woman didn't respond. She leaned over the counter, hands folded neatly in front of her, addressing Rema at the window. "We're here." My blood ran cold. I was just wiping the tables," I stammered. "You can't be in here. You saw us first." The other woman's voice cut through sharply. "So, you must listen." Carla fumbled for her phone. "Okay, I'm calling the cops," she said, trying to sound steady. The smiling woman's gaze locked onto mine, unblinking. Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it filled the space. "You should not have looked at us now. You'll see what we see." Then she turned to Carla. "You should not have interrupted." And then, suddenly, all the lights cut out. Total suffocating darkness. We screamed, all of us, my voice shaking, high-pitched. "Me, Rema! Travis!" I heard Carla shouting into her phone, trying desperately to reach 911. A few seconds later, dim red emergency lights flickered on from the back hallway. That's when I saw them again. Not the two women. Something else. By the soda machines, a crouched figure slowly rose. Its skin looked raw, wet, glistening like exposed muscle. Its eyes had no whites, just black voids that seemed to swallow the dim light. I turned and bolted toward the back. Rema grabbed my arm, pulling me into the freezer. Travis and Carla followed, slamming the heavy metal door shut behind us. We were all gasping for air. I was shaking so badly I could barely cry. "What the hell was that?" Travis panted. "They didn't come in through the drive-thru," Rema whispered, her voice trembling. They just appeared." "We need to get out," Carla said, voice quivering. "The back door, the fire exit." But when Travis tried to open the freezer, it wouldn't budge. The lock wasn't electronic. It wasn't supposed to lock from the outside. Then the music started. Slow, warped, the McDonald's jingle distorted through the ceiling speakers. We huddled together, frozen, for what felt like hours. When the lights finally returned, we cracked the door open cautiously. Everything appeared normal. The lobby was empty, tables and chairs untouched. The women gone. But then I saw it, scrawled across the touchscreen kiosk in the front. Smeared with ketchup was a message. She opened the curtain. Now we walk with her. I didn't want to understand what it meant. I didn't want to think about it. The cameras recorded nothing. No trace of the women, no sign of the power outage. Just static between 11:04 and 11:22 p.m. We all quit the next day. I haven't eaten at McDonald's since. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass the old building, I swear I see them. Two women in tan coats, standing by the window, smiling, still waiting. I was 10 the year it happened. It was 2012, and my family had just moved to Redmond, a tiny industrial town in northern Missouri. The kind of place where everyone either worked at the feed plant, the sawmill, or the 24-hour McDonald's on Main Street. That McDonald's wasn't anything special, except if you were a kid with too much time and parents who worked double shifts. We were a big family, 7 of us crammed into a battered rental house on the outskirts of town. My dad, Gary, had recently been laid off in St. Louis, and my mom, Rena, took the night shift at the gas station nearby. My older siblings picked up the slack wherever they could. Janelle, 16, worked every evening at McDonald's after school. Derek, 13, babysat me, our little sister Maya, and our baby brother Toby. Money was tight, but somehow we managed until the night he came. The house should have been my first warning. It was old, paint peeling in long vertical strips, and the wooden stairs groaned under even the lightest step. The windows were warped, glass rippling like water, and none had proper locks. The basement was worse, no floor, just packed dirt and spiderwebs thick enough to look like cotton candy. We called it the pit, and none of us ever went down there. The basement door had a heavy iron bolt, the kind you'd see on barn doors locking from the outside. My dad shrugged it off. Probably some paranoid old owner, he said, installing a new deadbolt on the front door. The place will be fine. Spoiler, it wasn't. I shared a room with Derek, which he hated, but I liked it. I always slept with a small light on, a cheap plug-in shaped like a cartoon bear. Yes, it was childish, but the dark made my skin crawl. Derek, thinking I was asleep, would always turn it off, and I'd sneak over to flick it back on. Our window faced the backyard, which meant that every trip to the bathroom at night meant walking past the kitchen and the huge uncovered back window. Anyone who's lived in a sketchy neighborhood knows. Never look out the windows at night, and definitely don't walk past them. It was a bitter February Friday. Janelle had just come home from her shift at McDonald's, shivering and exhausted. She dropped her jacket on the floor and collapsed on the couch. Dad was asleep upstairs, and Mom wouldn't be home until morning. Around 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. I tried to ignore it, hoping I'd fall back asleep, but the urge only got worse. I reluctantly climbed out of bed, tiptoeing into the hallway. The house was quiet, too quiet. I sped past the kitchen, eyes fixed on the floor, my usual strategy to avoid looking at the windows. And then I stopped. Tap, 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 tap. I froze mid-step. Pressed against the glass was a man. He looked like he'd been living in the woods for years. Tangled hair, a thick gray beard, filthy clothes. He cupped his hands to the glass, eyes locked on the inside, staring like he knew exactly who lived here. My throat went dry and I backed away, heart hammering, ducking behind the couch where Janelle still slept. Pinching myself didn't help. I wasn't dreaming. Then came the sound that made my blood run cold. The back door lock turned. He had a key. He opened the door slowly, calmly, like he'd done it 100 times before. He stepped in, shutting the door behind him without a sound. He was tall, easily 6'2", wearing a tattered coat over a hoodie. A black baseball cap shadowed most of his face. He didn't even glance around. He went straight for the kitchen pantry, opened it, grabbed a bag of chips, and started eating like he owned the place. Then, without hesitation, he turned and unbolted the basement door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body froze. I could only watch as he opened the basement, stepped inside, and slowly pulled the door shut behind him. My hands shook uncontrollably. How did he have a key? Why the basement? Had he done this before? I needed help. Derek had a phone. I didn't. I started crawling toward our bedroom, every nerve on edge, when I froze again. I heard footsteps coming up from the basement. My heart froze. I looked around the room and spotted my little brother Toby's blanket draped over a chair. Without thinking, I grabbed it, wrapped it around my feet, and began dragging myself across the floor, trying to muffle any sound. My hands shook as I reached the bedroom door, slamming it shut just as the man reached the top of the stairs. Boom. The door rattled violently. He pounded on it once, hard enough to make the walls shiver. I jumped back, adrenaline surging, and bolted to the kitchen. My eyes scanned the drawers, landing on the biggest knife I could find. I gripped it tightly and sprinted upstairs. Dad, wake up!" I screamed. My dad shot upright, groggy but instantly alert. "What? Maya, what's wrong?" "There's a man in the basement!" I gasped, shoving the knife into his hands, my panic making my words tumble over one another. He had a key. He came in, he went downstairs. He's trying to get out." My dad didn't hesitate. Former Army, broad-shouldered, always ready for a fight. He growled, "Stay here." At that moment, my mom appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, breath catching. "Gary, and what's going on?" "There's someone in the house," I said, tugging at her sleeve. "He's in the basement. He tried to get out." I locked it just in time. Her eyes darted toward the living room. "Where's Janelle?" "She's still on the couch," I cried. We ran downstairs together, and just as we reached the bottom, the basement door burst open. The man charged out, tackling my dad and slamming him into the floor. "Gary!" Mom screamed, panic twisting her voice. They wrestled, a blur of limbs. My dad tried to pin him down, but the man thrashed like a wild animal. My brain shut off. I stumbled back to the kitchen, grabbing another knife, hands trembling violently. I didn't think, I just moved. Heart pounding, I rushed back. Give it to me, my mom shouted, grabbing the knife from my shaking hands. Before I could even blink, she plunged it into the man's back. He let out a guttural, horrifying scream, a sound that still haunts my nightmares. My dad flipped him over, pinning him face down, locking his arms. Then came the sirens. The police stormed in, flashlights cutting through the chaos. My siblings ran into the room, screaming at the sight of blood on the floor. Janelle covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Derek pulled me into a tight hug as tears streamed down my face. The man didn't die. He was taken to the hospital and later arrested. He had no ID, no known address. The police couldn't trace where he came from. But the part that still chills me, the part that never leaves my mind, was that he had a key, an exact copy of our back door key. My dad had sworn he changed all the locks when we moved in. We hadn't given a spare to anyone. No realtor, no neighbors, nobody. The police ran fingerprint scans, nothing. They asked my parents if they'd ever seen him before. They hadn't. The basement told the story. They found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, water bottles, and one crumpled McDonald's receipt dated 3 days before the incident, from the McDonald's where Janelle worked. He'd been living in our basement, eating our food, watching us, listening, waiting. How long? We'll never know. We moved out the following week. Janelle quit her job at McDonald's. None of us slept properly for months. To this day, I check every door, every lock. I never step near the basement without hesitation, and I refuse to walk past uncovered windows at night. But the thing I'll never forget, the thing I carry with me, is my mom. She didn't let me stab that man. She looked me dead in the eyes and took that weight herself. And I'm grateful. Even though I still have nightmares about the man with the key, at least I don't have blood on my hands. It started with fries and a dare. My name is Isaac, and this happened when I was 17. Early September had that weird in-between feeling. Warm enough that sweat clung to your back in the sun, yet a breeze in the shade whispered that summer was slipping away. I'd spent the morning at the Oakage Youth Theater Club, rehearsing for a comedy showcase where parents laughed too loud, and half the audience didn't even get the jokes. By noon, our stomachs were growling. My friend Noah, loud, always grinning even when his jokes flopped, leaned over with that familiar mischievous sparkle in his eyes. "Bro, McDonald's run," he said. I shrugged. "Yeah, I'm starving." Neither of us had eaten all day, and the McDonald's on Riverbend Avenue was 10 minutes away. Close, cheap, fast. The kind of place you dream about when you're 17 and broke. We piled into Noah's old black Civic, windows stuck halfway down, music blasting too loud. I stuck my hand out the window, letting the wind slap against my palm. For a few minutes, the world's pressure lifted. No rehearsals, no college applications, no gas station shifts, just laughter and the hum of tires on asphalt. If only that sense of freedom had lasted. Pulling into the lot, everything looked normal. A few families were scattered at tables near the windows. A pickup truck was leaving the drive-thru. Nothing unusual. Inside, the air conditioning hit us like a wall. Noah groaned, flopping his head back dramatically. "Dude, this is heaven." We got in line. 2 people stood ahead. An older man, balding, scowling like he'd been plucked from someone's grumpy grandfather montage, and a younger guy, mid-20s, dark hoodie, gray sweatpants, slides with socks. He carried a small white grocery bag and scrolled through his phone. Nothing about him screamed danger, yet my gut twisted as he glanced up again and again, scanning the restaurant instead of the menu or the cashier. That prickling sense, something's off, but I can't explain it. I leaned toward Noah. "You see that guy?" He followed my gaze, whispering, "What about him?" I couldn't explain it. My stomach nodded. The man stepped out of line, moving toward a side door near the dining area, one customers rarely used. He paused, looked back at us too long, then slipped outside. We moved forward, ordered our McChickens, fries, and drinks. Noah added a McFlurry, naturally. With tray in hand, he pointed to a corner booth near the side door. I hesitated. "You good?" Noah asked. "Yeah," I lied, forcing myself into the seat. I faced the parking lot. Noah had his back to it. As we unwrapped our burgers, I noticed a red bike propped against the building outside. It hadn't been there when we arrived. Then I froze. The man was back. Outside the window. standing unnervingly still, not looking at me but directly at Noah. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, the edges tinged yellow, wild and animal-like. The white bag was slung over his shoulder, and through the side of his hoodie a machete handle peeked out. I barely whispered, "Noah." "Don't look behind you." "What?" "There's a man outside. Watching you. He's got a machete." Noah froze mid-bite, eyes wide. What do we do?" I don't know," I muttered, my voice shaking. We stayed rooted, hearts hammering. His breath fogged the glass. Then he moved, slowly, deliberately, circling the building as if he had all the time in the world. Moments later, he appeared at another window down the line, still watching, smiling, machete and bag in hand. My knees quivered. I stumbled to the counter, leaning close to a young employee, probably a college student. "Hey, there's a guy outside. He's armed, been watching us." The kid glanced up lazily. Okay, I'll tell my manager." I returned to Noah, chest pounding. "He's not doing anything." "What do we— Wait," I whispered, and we sat there frozen as the world outside held its breath. "And stay calm." I told myself that over and over, even as my hands shook. Then an idea sparked. I pulled out my phone and held it up toward Noah, pretending to snap a picture of him. He caught on instantly, leaning in with that goofy grin, unaware of what I was really doing. I adjusted the angle, framing the man outside in the background. Click. I checked the screen. Perfect. There he was, pressed against the glass, machete handle visible through the side of his hoodie. Heart hammering, I got up and moved to a nearby table where a woman and her 2 kids were eating. I leaned close, voice low but urgent. "Ma'am, there's a man outside. He has a weapon. He's been watching us." Her eyes widened as she followed my gaze. She gasped and pulled the children closer to her, murmuring something I didn't catch. The tension rippled through the restaurant like a sudden gust of wind. I alerted a man at another table. He stood immediately, stepping back from the window. The air felt thick, almost electric. And then, he vanished again. I scanned every window. Nothing. My whisper was barely audible. Where'd he go? Noah's jaw tightened. Maybe he left. I didn't believe him. Something in my gut screamed that he hadn't gone far. I waited, counting the seconds, then pulled out my phone again and dialed 911. As soon as I hit call, movement caught my eye. He was back, emerging from behind the trash enclosure near the drive-thru, slowly heading toward the side door right next to our table. My chest dropped. Noah barely breathed. "Is he coming in?" "I don't know," I muttered. We froze, paralyzed, watching him approach. Then just a few feet from the door, he paused. One last look at the window where we sat, a slow, deliberate gaze that made my stomach twist. Without a word, he walked to the red bike, swung onto it, and pedaled away with that same casual, unnerving slowness, as if daring us to watch him go. He disappeared behind the hardware store next door, and only then could I inhale without my chest feeling like it would collapse. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher, describing every detail, the machete, his hoodie, the pictures I had taken. She thanked me, promised a patrol unit would arrive soon, and told us to stay put. Noah went to find the manager. It took showing the photo for them to take the situation seriously. We sat back down, scanning the parking lot. Every passing car a fresh jolt of fear. My fries had gone cold, my McChickens untouched. Finally, 12 minutes later, the police arrived. They took statements, examined the photo, and delivered the cold reality. He hadn't technically broken any laws. Brandishing a weapon or stepping inside would have changed everything, but technically nothing had. Still, they searched the area, warning us they'd ban him if they found him. They didn't. 20 minutes later, we were told it was likely safe to leave. We slid back into Noah's car in silence. After a long pause, he exhaled. "Dude, what the hell was that?" We laughed, but not because it was funny, because it was all we could do. It's been a year since that day. I'm 18 now. I still have that photo, shown to maybe 5 people. Every time I see it, the same sinking feeling hits. He wasn't aimlessly wandering. He wasn't just staring. He had a purpose. He was watching, waiting. If I hadn't called 911 when I did, if he had stepped inside, I don't even want to imagine it. Noah and I still joke sometimes, calling him the machete guy. But deep down, we both know we were dangerously close to something that day. Something real. Something terrifying. And the worst part? He's still out there. watching, waiting. Maybe someone else through another window, unaware of how close they are to him. I hadn't planned on going out that night. It was one of those early autumn Saturdays where the sky couldn't make up its mind, half blue, half bruised with clouds threatening rain. The wind had a faint bite, like winter was testing its claws prematurely, and by 6 o'clock the daylight was already slinking away. My parents had driven up to Leeds to visit my Nan, who'd broken her hip the week before, leaving me home alone until probably midnight. They trusted me enough to hold down the fort. I was 16, responsible enough to babysit apparently, but still not grown up enough to slip out without the obligatory lecture. I was curled up on the sofa in my oldest hoodie and a pair of joggers, half watching a crime series on Netflix while scrolling through TikTok without really looking at anything. Bored wasn't the word. I felt gray, empty, restless, a dull ache in my chest that made doing literally anything seem better than the silence. That's when my phone buzzed. Tasha, fancy a cheeky Massey's? Benji's been nagging me for nuggets all day. Me? Can I be bothered? Kind of warm in bed. Ngil. Tasha, I'm already walking there. Don't make me sit with him alone. I laughed at her text, a short, bitter-sounding exhale, and then sat up. 2 blocks wasn't far, just past the Sainsbury's over the mini roundabout. The McDonald's on High Street was the closest in our little Yorkshire town of Wetherby. It wasn't rough. Mostly families, pensioners, and commuters passing through on the way to bigger cities. I dialed Mom. She answered on the second ring. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice warm but sharp, the kind that pricked your nerves even when you hadn't done anything wrong. "Yeah," I said casually, trying for nonchalance. "Tasha and Benji are heading to Max's. Mind if I meet them?" There was a pause. "It's dark already," she said finally. "It's only 7, I countered. "And I've got pepper spray. I'll be fine." "You know I don't like you walking around alone after sunset," she pressed. "It's literally 2 streets away. I'll call when I get there and on my way back, I promised." Another pause, then a sigh. "Weird. All right, but keep your phone on and text me if anything seems off." By the time I got there, it was packed as usual. Little kids in school uniforms screamed across tables, delivery drivers shouted numbers at the collection counter, and a group of teens hogged the self-order screens, blasting music from a portable speaker. Tasha spotted me first, waving from the far corner near the window. Her little brother, Benji, was already halfway through a large fries, ketchup smeared across his cheek. "Finally decided to join us?" Tasha teased as I slid into the booth beside them. Yeah, took your time," she said with a grin. "You're lucky I like you." We ordered Big Mac meal for me, McChicken for her, nuggets for Benji, and then dug in. For the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about how dull my weekend was. We joked, gossiped, laughed at the absurdity of school. "Swear to God," Tasha said through a mouthful of chips, "another pop quiz on Monday." I'm going to scream. "If Mr. Dawes gives us one." "He's just bitter," I replied. "No one showed up to his lunchtime chess club," I added, laughing. "I showed up once," Benji piped up. "You also threw up in the chess bin," Tasha reminded him, and we all erupted into laughter. I was full, maybe too full, having inhaled most of my fries before even starting the Big Mac. I picked it up and hesitated. Maybe save it for later. Midnight snack, maybe. That's when I noticed him. A man, clearly homeless, standing near the bin by the door. He looked about 60, maybe older, but life had carved deep lines into his face, made him look ancient. His clothes were crusted with mud, and his long gray beard hung in knotted strands. He shuffled slowly toward our table, each step heavy and deliberate. "If you're not going to eat that," he rasped, pointing at my Big Mac, still in the box. "Could I have it?" His voice was rough, caught somewhere between gravel and phlegm, like a cough that had lived in him for decades. I blinked. I was going to take it home, actually. He didn't move closer, just held my gaze. There was no anger, only a kind of empty, hopeless pleading that made my stomach tighten. Tasha reached into her bag. "We can get you something," she offered softly. "I've got it," I said quickly, stopping her, then louder, more than I intended. "Why don't you get a job instead of begging?" His face fell. I wasn't even angry. I didn't know why I said it. Maybe the tension of the crowded room, maybe some need to appear tough, or maybe just cruelty I hadn't realized I possessed. "I'm sorry," he muttered, almost under his breath, stepping back as a McDonald's employee walked past. I seized the chance to flag her down. "He's bothering us," I said. 2 minutes later, a security guard arrived. A young guy, maybe early 20s, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he approached the man cautiously, speaking in low, quiet tones, trying not to escalate things further. The man tried to speak, maybe to explain himself, but before we could even hear him, the security guard shoved him roughly by the arm and started dragging him toward the exit. We pressed our faces to the window, frozen as the old man stumbled on the uneven pavement outside. Then he fell, face first, hard. There was a sick crack as his mouth hit the curb. I saw a flash of red. A tooth, maybe. I flinched but didn't move. Tasha's eyes were wide as she stared at me. "That was harsh," she whispered. "He shouldn't have come to our table," I said defensively. My voice sounded hollow even to me. She didn't reply. We lingered inside for another hour. Benji got a McFlurry. Tasha and I joked about the upcoming school trip. The weird, heavy tension from earlier had mostly faded. When we finally got up to leave, Tasha offered to see me home. "You coming with us?" she asked. "Dad's picking us up." "He can drop me," I said, tugging my hoodie over my head. "My mom's called me twice already. It's just 5 minutes, I'll walk." "You sure?" "Positive," I said. We hugged and I waved at Benji as the sliding doors whooshed open behind me. The night was cool, quiet. The street almost empty, a few cars zipping past, a lone cyclist with a blinking rear light. I had one earbud in, music low, barely enough to keep the silence from swallowing me. Then something hit the back of my head with a sharp, brutal thud. A rock maybe, or something like it. I staggered forward, hands flying to the spot. My fingers came back wet. Blood. Pain throbbed deep in my skull. Dazed, I turned and froze. He was there. The old man. The same one from McDonald's, but now, something was different. He hunched near a lamppost, his mouth bloody, a tooth missing. His eyes burned, not sad, not pleading, but twisted. Something dark. I stepped back. "Hey, what the hell?" He didn't answer. And then he ran. Faster than I thought possible. Faster than a man that age should move. He grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me violently. "Help! Somebody help me!" I screamed, my voice cracking. My knees buckled. I could smell him, sour sweat, rot, stale beer. His spit landed on my face as he screamed something incomprehensible. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." "Please stop," I whimpered. He shoved me hard. I hit the pavement, palms scraping against the rough concrete. I scrambled backward, crawling, tears blurring my vision. And then he stopped. Not chasing, not moving, just watching. And laughing. A dry, rasping laugh that cut through the night like nails on a chalkboard. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I burst through the front door, bolted it behind me, and collapsed in the hallway. Sobbing, hyperventilating, covered in sweat, dirt, and blood from the back of my head, I called my mom. I couldn't even form a full sentence. Just broken, terrified words. They drove back immediately, I remember later. Took nearly an hour. I sat curled in the corner of the living room the whole time, staring at the window, expecting him to appear, grinning with that bloody, jagged mouth. He didn't. The police came later that night. I gave a statement. They took me to the hospital for a scan. Mild concussion. No stitches needed. They never found him. 14 years later, I'm 30 now, living in London. I've got a steady job, a partner, a flat of my own. And still, every time I see someone homeless, a shiver goes through me. A memory, a warning, a lesson. I offer them food now. Always, sometimes cash, sometimes a hot coffee. Not out of sainthood, but because I remember. How one careless, cruel sentence turned a hungry man into something else. Something monstrous. And every time I walk past someone sleeping rough, I wonder, what if I had just given him the burger? I never really liked clowns. Not as a kid, and certainly not now after everything that happened. I grew up in Henderson Valley, a sleepy town about 20 minutes outside Milwaukee. Quiet, unremarkable, the kind of place where everyone knows your name if you've worked at the same gas station or diner long enough. People start thinking of you as part of the furniture. I floundered after community college didn't pan out, taking whatever job I could. Eventually, I landed at Denny's Grill Spot, our town's sad little knockoff of McDonald's. About 6 months into working there, the manager pulled me aside. "Hey, Jack, you ever thought about playing Danny the Griller?" he asked, grinning. I blinked. Danny the Griller? You know, our version of Ronald McDonald. Birthday parties, weekend events. The old guy quit. I was tall, skinny, and desperate for overtime. I hated the idea, but after rent, groceries, and gas, I couldn't say no. So that's how I became a clown. Red wig, yellow jumpsuit, oversized shoes, painted on grin that felt less like a smile and more like a permanent mask. I spent weekends outside the drive-thru, waving at cars, handing out balloons. Most kids either laughed or ran screaming. The job was awkward, suffocating, and humiliating, but it paid. I was used to being laughed at. High school had been a minefield. Never the popular kid, never the jock, just Jack Turner, the quiet kid doodling comics in the back of the room. I thought life would change after graduation. It didn't. Real life has a way of smashing illusions, and there I was, 23, dressed as a clown, shivering in October's chill, trying to make balloon animals for strangers. That night, everything went wrong. Thursday. Just cold enough to make your fingers ache if you didn't have gloves. The store closed at 10. It was 9:50. The lobby was empty, the drive-thru quiet. I hadn't sat in 4 hours, hadn't even gone to the bathroom. I told Rachel, my coworker at the counter, "Be right back." She nodded, buried in paperwork. By the time I returned, the lobby was still empty, but Rachel looked off, pale, uneasy. "Hey," she whispered. "Yeah?" "Some woman came in, asking for you." I was adjusting my red wig, trying to roll my shoulders free of tension. "Me?" "Yeah." Said she was looking for the clown, Danny. I shrugged. Probably some last-minute mom wanting a picture. I barely hid an eye roll. "Where is she?" Rachel pointed toward the exit. "Out there. Been standing a while." I expected a tired mom, a cranky kid tugging at her sleeve. What I saw instead made my stomach knot. She was just beyond the glass doors. Thin, maybe late 40s, wearing a threadbare cardigan with holes in the sleeves. Her back was rigid, staring straight up at the sky like she'd spotted something spectacular. Her stillness, her posture, it didn't feel right. I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, you were looking for me?" She turned slowly, almost painfully. When our eyes met, a chill ran through me. Her eyes were too wide, her pupils unfocused. She blinked, once, twice. Then her voice, soft but strange, pierced the quiet. "My son. He wanted a photo with you. He loves Danny." I glanced around the empty lot. Where is he?" She hesitated as if the question confused her. "Who?" "Your son." A shadow flickered across her face. The smile faltered. "Oh, he's sick. Couldn't come, but if you'd come with me, he's waiting. Just a quick photo. I'll pay you." Her tone didn't sit right, but I was behind on rent. Payday wasn't for another few days. My stomach twisted with indecision, but then she added, "I'll give you $50. I nodded, reluctant. "Okay, let me grab my things." Inside, I clocked out, told Rachel I had a last-minute side gig. She squinted, unconvinced. "You sure?" "Yeah. It'll be quick," I said. I hoped she believed me. We walked together through Henderson Valley, past the closed post office, past the little library. Houses thinned. Her footsteps were silent. Mine bounced against the empty streets. She didn't speak once. 10 minutes in, I realized we weren't heading toward the familiar residential blocks. We were leaving town. The sidewalk ended. Now we walked on gravel. I felt the unease coil in my stomach like a living thing, every step echoing in the quiet night. "Where exactly do you live?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She stopped and turned, blinking slowly like my question had caught her off guard. "I don't," she said simply. I frowned. "Then where's your son?" Her smile snapped back, sudden and eerie, like a switch had been flipped. "He's waiting at the cemetery." My stomach sank. I halted mid-step. "The cemetery?" "Yes, just ahead," she said, stepping forward again. I swallowed hard. "You said he was sick?" "Not gone." She didn't answer, just kept walking, as if the words had never reached her. My mind raced. I considered turning back. She was small, maybe 5'5", probably under 100 pounds, and I was 23, not defenseless. But the cash, the overdue rent, and a strange, foolish part of me thought, maybe she just needs help. The cemetery gate loomed ahead, rusted and squealing in protest as she pushed it open. Wind stirred through the bare trees, their branches rattling together like whispers. She moved swiftly, now certain, purposeful. We stopped at a small headstone near the back fence. Compared to the others, it looked cared for. Freshly washed, adorned with toys and plastic flowers. The name read, Michael Tanner, 2014-2021. I froze. Our little comedian, she said softly, voice trembling, always smiling. My son, he loved jokes. Will you tell him one? I stared at her. The painted grin on my face suddenly felt grotesque, suffocating. She waited, expectant, a quiet plea in her wide, unblinking eyes. Tears glistened at the corners, though none fell. It was easier to comply. I forced a small joke, something about a burger and a milkshake. Silence. Then a giggle. Soft, fleeting. A child's laugh. My knees went weak. She turned to me, that doll-like stare fixed, and she laughed too, a high, mimicking sound that bounced off the headstones, filling the air like a mocking echo. I think I need to go, I stammered. She kept laughing. Then her expression dropped, cold, insistent. Wait, Michael wants a picture. No, I said quickly, shaking my head. I'm sorry. I have to go now. Wait, she cried, grabbing my sleeve. He's not done. He's not ready. I yanked my arm free. Her voice followed me as I backed away into the darkened rows of stones. Every child wants a photo with Danny the Griller, don't they? I didn't run. My legs pumped hard, my oversized clown shoes tripping me twice. I didn't look back until I reached the main road. She was gone. I quit 2 days later. I couldn't bear the wig, the costume, the mask of that painted smile. Rachel said the woman never returned, but I kept expecting her at the drive-thru outside my apartment just beyond my sight. Some nights I would wake, heart pounding, and hear a faint giggle in the darkness, just once, always soft, fleeting. 3 months later, the town paper ran a story. Grieving mother arrested after a series of harassment reports near Henderson Cemetery. The article named Marilyn Tanner, whose son Michael had died 2 years prior in a biking accident. She had been seen multiple times near fast food restaurants, trying to convince workers to meet her son. Some had followed her. Most walked away. No one reported it until a teen at Dairy Den told his manager. The final line made my chest tighten. Authorities found several photos near the boy's grave. Most were water damaged, but one remained intact. A man in a red wig and yellow costume stood beside the headstone, staring straight at the camera. His face was painted in a smile, but his eyes, full of fear. I never took that photo, or at least I don't remember taking it, but I saw it. It was me, Danny the Griller, holding a balloon next to a grave, and just behind me, barely visible, a small shadow of a child smiling. It was supposed to be an easy shift. That's what I kept telling myself over and over like a mantra. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and my name's Alina. Back in 2009, I worked part-time at the McDonald's on the edge of Bramblewood, a quiet town tucked between sprawling farmland and thick pine forests in northern Oregon. The place wasn't busy most nights. Half our customers were long-haul truckers who'd pulled off the state highway, the other half locals who practically lived off the dollar menu. That night, mid-November, it was bone-chilling cold, the kind of cold that made your nose sting the moment you stepped outside. Inside, the heat hummed softly, mingling with the smell of fryer oil and cheap coffee that clung to everything, from the counters to the yellow plastic trays. It was a closing shift, meaning I'd be stuck there from 4 p.m. until midnight. I remember that evening clearly because it started so normally. My mom had dropped me off early. We only had one car and she needed it for her second job cleaning offices downtown. I didn't mind. It gave me a few quiet hours to work on college applications in the break room and eat a filet-o-fish in peace before the dinner rush. My manager that night was Carla, 26, sharp as a tack, no nonsense. The kind of woman who could quiet a full lobby with just a glare. Jamal was in the kitchen, always humming Drake songs off-key. And Rita handled the drive-thru like she was born with a headset permanently glued to her ear. I mention them because later, they were the only ones who even noticed what I was about to see. Around 8:15 p.m., things started to feel off. After 8, Bramblewood's McDonald's was almost always dead. That night, there were maybe 2 tables in use. A young couple with a screaming toddler and an elderly man who treated his plain cheeseburger like a delicacy. I was wiping down the ketchup station when the door creaked open. 2 women walked in. That alone wasn't strange, but everything about them screamed wrong. They wore long black dresses straight out of a Victorian drama, high collars, lace sleeves, hems brushing the floor. One had her hair in a tight bun, the other a braid slung over her shoulder. Their skin was ghostly pale, powdery like paper, and their eyes were dark, almost hollow. They didn't speak a word. I glanced at Carla, expecting her to greet them or hand them a menu. But she froze, her expression unreadable. Hi? Welcome to McDonald's, I stammered, unsure if they were part of some performance or just eccentric tourists. The woman with the bun tilted her head slowly. They glided further inside rather than walked. And that's when I noticed it. They made no sound. No scuff, no tap, nothing. Carla finally forced a smile. Come on in. It's cold out, she said, her voice tight. You 2 need a minute to decide? Still no response. They stood by the entrance, staring past us, past the counter, past the soda machines, like they were seeing something on a plane of reality I couldn't reach. Jamal peeked from the kitchen window, joking. Yo, who let the Victorian ghosts in? Rita snorted through her headset. They look like they just walked out of a funeral in 1890, she whispered to me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were headed to a play, or one of those historical reenactments. But they didn't order anything, they just stood there, statues in black lace. That's when the toddler started screaming. Not crying, screaming. He pointed directly at the women writhing in his high chair like he was trying to escape his own skin. They're wrong. They're wrong, he howled. His mother snatched him up and his father squinted at the women, uneasy. Y'all need help or something, he asked. Still nothing. Then finally the woman with the braid spoke, but not to him. She looked at me. Her voice was unnervingly calm, smooth, like she was reading a script. Is the manager present? Carla stepped forward, her jaw tight, unease written across her face. That would be me. What's going on? The woman smiled. We've come to collect what was promised. What does that mean? Carla asked, confusion creeping into her voice. Insurance? Something else? The woman with the bun added nothing. But then they both turned at exactly the same moment toward the back hallway, the one that led to the old party room. The party room had been sealed for over a year. Moldy walls, warped floors from a leaky roof, and a layer of dust thick enough to leave footprints. Corporate never fixed it, never reopened it. Yet there they were, staring straight at that door as if they were expecting it to open. I felt my stomach drop. Something about the way they moved, how they looked past us, made the air feel heavier. My chest tightened like the room had shrunk around us, and I realized that this night, the one I'd thought would be easy, was anything but ordinary. The 2 women glided toward the hallway, still making not a single sound. That's when Carla finally yelled, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet. Hey! That's off limits. They didn't slow down. Not a twitch. Not a pause. They passed right by me, and I swear the air dropped like someone had opened a freezer. The ketchup packets I was holding stiffened in my hands like frozen blocks of plastic. My heart pounded. I followed, almost automatically, with Carla and Jamal behind me, and I wished to God we hadn't. They stopped in front of the party room door, the old, heavy padlock still in place. Then, without touching the handle, without a key, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was darkness so thick it felt solid, only broken by a flickering overhead light that cast the room in stuttering shadows. No footprints marked the dust-covered floor, yet somehow they walked inside like it was perfectly natural. Carla and I peeked in cautiously, and I heard Jamal's whispered voice behind us. Y'all see that? The old birthday mural, the one with faded balloons and Ronald McDonald, was shredded, like something had clawed through it with frantic, desperate hands. At the far end of the room, the 2 women stood facing each other by the wall, completely still. Then, they vanished, not in smoke, not in light, just gone, as if they'd never existed. Carla's body shook visibly. She pulled out her phone and called the district manager, her voice tight and trembling. We closed early, locking every door and window. I stayed behind because I was too terrified to walk home alone. Rita, annoyed but equally unsettled, suddenly gasped. Wait, those dresses. Those exact ones. I've seen them before. She disappeared into the storage closet and came back with a cardboard box labeled History. Inside were old black and white and yellowing photographs. And there they were, two women, arm in arm, one smiling, one frowning, wearing those exact dresses. The photo's caption read, "McDonald's opening day 1912 staff guests." "That makes no sense," Jamal muttered. "This McDonald's was built in the 80s. Carla paled. "The franchise, yes. But this lot, this land had a history." She quickly pulled up parcel records on her phone. The McDonald's sat atop the remains of a hotel that burned down in 1912. Two sisters died inside, Eleanor and Constance Blythe. An article detailed a tragic insurance dispute. They had been denied a claim by the hotel's owner and perished after locking themselves in the ballroom. That ballroom was now our party room. That night I barely slept. My cousin was visiting, and I must have looked like a ghost because he kept asking if I was okay. Around 3:38 a.m., I woke to him standing at the window staring silently outside. "They're back," he whispered. I ran to the window, heart thudding, but saw nothing. "Who?" He just pointed, his finger trembling. "The women. They're here again." I asked him if they had come inside. He shook his head. Even in his half-sleep, his face was pale, and the chill he described ran down my spine. He had never heard my story, not a word, yet somehow knew what I had lived through. The next day I called Carla. She admitted she'd dreamed of them that night. In her dreams they asked again, their voices soft and insistent, "Where is what was promised?" 3 days later, the district manager came down in person. The mural was stripped, everything removed from the party room, and the door was sealed with solid steel. It remains locked to this day. A year later, I had left McDonald's, gone to college, tried to move on. But sometimes I still dream of that icy air, that soft, eerie voice. I looked the sisters up online once more, finding a blurry obituary. Eleanor and Constance Blythe. They had taken out an insurance policy on the hotel, but the company never paid, thanks to the owner, Richard Hart. Decades later, the land was leased to McDonald's by the same Hart family, the same bloodline, the same betrayal. And maybe, just maybe, the sisters were never after me. They were after what was promised. Some debts don't expire, not even in death. I had always been the fun uncle in the family, the one who let rules slide just enough to be cool. Video game marathons, soda before dinner, staying up way past bedtime to watch every superhero movie that came out. My sister Monica was the exact opposite. She ran her life and Alex's with military precision. Single mom, high-pressure sales job, every bedtime strictly enforced, screen time rationed like currency. Her son Alex, 11, was bright, thoughtful, and polite to the point of being self-conscious. When Monica called last week, asking if I could watch him while she flew to Dallas for a 5-day corporate training, I didn't hesitate. I was on summer break from teaching high school history, and honestly, I'd missed the kid. The week we had together was everything I remembered. Arcade trips, superhero flicks, late-night switch battles, fries and milkshakes in messy, laughing chaos. On our last day, Friday, I promised we'd grab burgers before Monica picked him up at the airport. "Can we go to McDonald's?" Alex asked, practically bouncing. "Sure," I said. "You want a Happy Meal like old times?" "Only if it comes with a toy." I smiled. That's my kid. We drove a few miles to a McDonald's in Greystone, New Hampshire. Not one of the new shiny ones, but Alex loved it. He said the cracked faux leather booths and flickering fluorescent lights felt more real. It was crowded for 3:30 p.m. on a weekday, packed with kids from school just letting out, parents corralling them, and a few older folks sipping coffee in silence. We stood in line, ordered 2 quarter-pounders, large fries, a Happy Meal with apple slices and a chocolate milk. I grabbed the tray, scanning for an empty table when Alex tugged on my sleeve. "There," he said, pointing. I squinted. The booth looked empty, but not really. A man sat on one side, sipping a small coffee. Middle-aged, pale, wearing a beige raincoat despite the week's dry weather. A long, glossy red line ran down his right cheek, a fresh cut that drew my eye immediately. "He's sitting there," I said, hesitating. "Just on one side," Alex said. "There's room." I paused, but the man glanced up, offering a small nod. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Plenty of space." So we sat. I took the seat beside Alex across from the man. We dug in. Alex tore open his Happy Meal like he had 5 years ago, his excitement infectious. "Let's see what toy you got," I said. A yellow minion popped out, the kind that spins if you press its head. The man leaned in slightly, eyes lighting up. "I remember these," he said. "They used to be better, more detailed. Back then each one was unique." Alex frowned. "Why did they stop making those?" The man's smile widened just a little too much. "Some people thought they were wrong." "Wrong how?" Alex asked, curiosity high in his voice. I sipped my Coke, assuming he meant safety issues, choking hazards, paint, but the man's next move made my stomach twist. He slid a hand into his coat pocket, fingers wrestling with something inside. A faint crinkle came from the bag, thick paper or plastic. "Let me show you," he muttered, leaning closer, as if we were sharing a secret. Alex leaned forward eagerly. "What is it?" he asked. The man withdrew a crumpled brown paper bag like something you'd get at a street vendor and placed it carefully on the table. He set it down with a reverence that made my gut tighten. "Check this out," he said. He pulled out a toy, but not the kind you'd expect in a Happy Meal. About the size of a softball, shaped like a jellyfish, its translucent dome shimmered like soap film. Droopy rubbery tentacles hung below, and it had a face, human-like, staring with blank, glassy eyes. Its grid-like mouth looked stitched on, but not cartoonish, more like someone had drawn it on skin. Alex recoiled slightly. "What? That's weird." The man beamed. "Isn't it amazing? Go ahead, touch it. The textures, like nothing else." My heart raced. Something in the way he said it carried an almost hypnotic weight, subtle but undeniable. I put my hand on Alex's shoulder. "Hey, bud, don't touch that." The man tilted his head, his grin unshaken. "It's just a toy. Kids love toys." I met his eyes directly. "He doesn't need to touch anything that came out of your pocket." The man's smile didn't fade, but there was a strange glint in his eyes. Something unspoken. Heavy and wrong. Alex shivered beside me, half curious, half afraid, and I knew then that this wasn't going to be just another casual lunch. "You think I'm dangerous?" he asked, more amused than offended, leaning back just slightly like he was testing me. "I think you need to leave," I said, low and firm. "Right now." He leaned forward across the table, so close I could smell the faint, stale peppermint on his breath. "What are you going to do?" he murmured, almost a taunt. "Ban me from McDonald's?" I clenched my fists, my heart hammering. I was ready to stand, ready to swing if I had to, but he moved first. Slowly, deliberately, he gathered his jellyfish toy, still in the crumpled paper bag. No rush, no panic, just this sick, calculated calm that made my stomach twist. As he walked past, he glanced over his shoulder. "Some toys stick with you," he said softly, "even when you grow up." Alex and I didn't touch our food. I packed it into the to-go boxes, telling him we'd eat in the car. "Uncle Mason," he whispered as we got up. "That guy was scary." "I know, buddy," I said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "He's gone. Let's go." At the counter, I told the manager, a bored-looking college kid, about the man and his behavior. The guy shrugged, bored. "Creeps are everywhere, man. He didn't do anything wrong." "Wrong?" I snapped. "He showed a kid a messed-up toy and told him to touch it." The manager shook his head. "He didn't touch the boy. Creepy, sure. Criminal, not really." I didn't answer. I shoved the boxes into the car, buckled Alex in, and started the engine. As I shifted into drive, a shadow fell across the driver's side window. A slam shook the glass. It was him. His hand flat against the window, eyes unblinking. Alex gasped, a high, terrified sound that made my chest tighten. I reached for my phone, dialing 911, but froze. The man slowly raised the paper bag, pulling out the jellyfish toy. He held it to his tongue, dragging it up from bottom to top, licking it in a deliberate, grotesque ritual. Alex shrieked, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Get the hell away from us!" I shouted, yanking the car into reverse. Tires squealed against asphalt as we peeled out of the parking lot. That night, Alex barely spoke. I tucked him onto the couch, a blanket pulled tight around him, turning on a movie for background noise, but he didn't watch. His eyes kept darting to the window, imagining the man waiting outside. I stayed up, listening for any sound, the crunch of footsteps, a shadow sliding past, but there was nothing. No sign of him, only the image of that calm, cruel face etched into my mind. In the morning, I drove Alex to the airport. Monica met us, and while Alex didn't say a word, I pulled her aside and told her everything. Later, I reported the incident to the Greystone police. "He didn't touch the boy or threaten you," one officer said politely. "Creepy, yes. Criminal, not really. He followed us," I insisted, licked a toy in front of him. "He was targeting us. Could have been a prank," the officer said. "People are weird." They took a statement and that was it. A few days later, Monica called. "Alex is still scared," she said. "He asked me if jellyfish live in people's pockets." My stomach sank. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have seen the signs earlier." "It's not your fault," she added. "Something sick, but not your fault." I don't know what that toy was. Custom made, haunted, some twisted art, but I do know this. I've driven back to that McDonald's, sat in the same booth, watched the people come and go. No sign of him. But sometimes, just sometimes, I see a kid walking out with a Happy Meal, a toy that looks a little too detailed, a little too strange. I don't know who that man was or where he got that toy. I only know what I felt that day. And if you ever see a jellyfish with a human face in a paper bag, don't touch it. Don't let your kid touch it. Just leave. I was 10 years old when it happened. Back then I lived in East Los Angeles in a house that felt permanently overcrowded, with my parents, my 2 younger siblings, my cousin Leo, and my Uncle Rudy all packed under the same roof. The walls seemed to hum with the weight of bodies, voices, and the smell of old cooking. Our neighborhood was old too. Sidewalks cracked and buckled from roots that pushed through the concrete, stray dogs wandering the alleys like they owned the place, and the faint smell of exhaust that never really went away. Nothing ever really felt new, even when it was. Leo was 13, the older cousin everyone looked up to. He had that reckless confidence, that I know better than everyone else swagger that made me believe every word he said. If Leo told me something was safe, I believed it. If he told me to jump, I jumped without thinking. I idolized him in the way little cousins do, blindly. It was a Saturday in late July, the kind of sticky summer afternoon where the air sticks to your skin, and time feels slow and heavy. We'd been holed up in the living room for hours playing Smash Brothers until the power flickered, and Uncle Rudy yelled from the kitchen, "Get outside before your eyeballs fry in here." We obeyed without question. "Let's go to the McDonald's on Hillrest," Leo suggested as we stepped into the blistering heat. It was only about 10 blocks away, but it felt like a pilgrimage. The place had just reopened after renovations. New booths, new soda machines, air conditioning that felt like heaven compared to our sweltering house. "Come on," Leo said, fishing a few crumpled bills from his wallet. "We'll get a burger and split a sundae or something." I didn't care what we ate. I just wanted out of the house, away from the heat, the noise, and the boredom. We took the back streets, hopping low fences, cutting through yards. This was just how we got around. That's when we passed it, the warehouse. Hard to miss. Its chain-link fence sagged and leaned, covered in graffiti. The building itself half collapsed. It looked like something the world had forgotten. People said it used to be a textile factory in the 60s, then maybe a recycling plant, and after that no one really knew. But everyone had a story. "Don't look at it too long," Leo muttered as we walked past. I laughed. "That place is cursed?" "You're just saying that." He didn't laugh. Not like me. His eyes lingered on the building, serious, almost wary. "No, for real. Back in the 90s, 2 kids dared each other to spend the night there. Never came out. Cops found their bikes outside. Nothing else. Not even sleeping bags. They check inside?" They tried, but something happened to the one who went in. He glanced back at the warehouse like it could hear us. They say he tore out his own tongue. Came out screaming, never spoke again. I went silent after that. The heat suddenly heavier, the world narrower around me. We made it to McDonald's, ordered 1 cheeseburger meal and a hot fudge sundae to share, and carried our tray to the window seats. I remember taking a bite of that burger, the taste somehow perfect after the oppressive heat and fear. Then I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker in the broken window of the warehouse, a shadow shifting across shattered glass. I blinked, thought maybe it was a bird, a trick of the sun, heat waves rising from the asphalt. But then it moved again, and this time I knew it was watching us. "Leo," I whispered, "look." He leaned forward, squinting. What the hell? There were two figures side by side, standing perfectly still. They weren't human, not completely. Their torsos were bloated and round as if swollen from some disease, their skin cracked and leathery like burnt rubber, their backs curved outward in jagged humps like broken shells. And their eyes, God, their eyes glowed red, pulsing like dying embers. Their mouths hung open in wide, jagged slits like someone had carved a snapping turtle's jaw into a skull. I froze. My hands clutched the tray so tight my knuckles ached. Leo's jaw tightened beside me, silent now. And for the first time I felt the cold, creeping weight of fear like it was sliding under my skin. And they were just standing there, watching. They didn't move. Not a twitch, not a blink. Just stood there, frozen, staring straight at us. Then one of them smiled, a slow, grotesque curl of its jagged mouth. That was it. I dropped my burger without thinking. The tray clattered to the floor, fries scattering, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. Shit, Leo cursed, grabbing my arm and yanking me back from the window. Come on, now, we're leaving. We started walking fast, almost running, our legs heavy, our lungs tight, but neither of us spoke until we had turned the corner and the warehouse was out of sight. I felt cold, not just scared, but like a sickness had crawled through me, like the air itself had changed, heavier, sharper. You saw it too, right? My voice barely reached above a whisper. Leo nodded, his face pale. Yeah, I saw them. We didn't go back to McDonald's that summer. Years passed. I turned 15, then 18. Moved out, went to college. Found work at a small auto shop in Glendale. But I never forgot those glowing red eyes. I never forgot that impossible feeling of being watched by something not entirely human. Sometimes I thought about going back, just to see if the place had been torn down or boarded up. But I never did. Not until last year. It was Thanksgiving. I was back in East LA visiting family. Uncle Rudy had passed and we were all gathered at Grandma Rose's house. She was getting old, her memory fading, but she still loved to talk, filling quiet spaces with stories from decades past. After dinner, she stepped out onto the porch with a cigarette, leaning back and staring down the road as smoke curled into the night. You remember that old warehouse by the McDonald's? She asked casually. My heart skipped. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. They used to say it was cursed. You know why? I shook my head. She exhaled slowly, letting the smoke hang in the air. 2 men hanged themselves inside right after they opened the plant. Brothers, immigrants, worked long hours, barely paid. One day they just snapped. Left a note on the wall, not written in ink. What do you mean? It looked like blood, she said, her voice trembling slightly, thick and heavy, almost like tar. She flicked ash onto the cracked pavement. No one bought the place after that, not even for storage. And you know what else? Her eyes softened, distant. Sometimes people said they saw them in the windows, just staring. I didn't say a word. I didn't tell her I had seen them too, that Leo and I hadn't been imagining it, because deep down I already knew. That night I went home and dug out my old sketchbook. Hidden behind years of doodles and homework notes on the last page was a pencil drawing I had made when I was 10. The warehouse, the 2 figures, their cracked, grotesque torsos, their glowing red eyes, their wide, jagged mouths, every line traced from memory, not imagination. I hadn't seen them since, but sometimes when I drive through East LA at night, I keep my windows rolled up, clutching the wheel a little tighter because I swear I can still feel them watching, and part of me knows that one day they might not stay behind the glass. I don't know if what I saw was real, or if it was just the imagination of a child trying to make sense of things no child should ever have to face. But the fear itself was real. Even now, more than 20 years later, my stomach still tightens into a strange, hollow ache whenever I hear the word peekaboo. I was 4 years old when it began. My name is Ivy and I grew up in Brook Hollow, Georgia, a quiet little town where nothing ever happened. Until it did. My mom always said I was a sensitive child, sensitive to sounds, textures, shadows, sensitive in a way that made normal life feel like it was layered in static and noise. I had night terrors, vivid dreams, and a habit of talking to empty corners as if someone were listening. My dad wasn't around much. He worked late shifts at a lumber yard and mostly came home just to sleep. My mom and older brother Simon, though, They remembered everything. They told me trauma can do strange things to a child's brain. But I swear what I experienced wasn't just trauma. It was something else entirely. It started in the spring of 2005. Mom had begun working nights at a hospital trying to make ends meet, which left evenings chaotic and hurried. Usually she would drop me off at the McDonald's on Elmwood Avenue while Simon finished his tutoring next door. At the time, it was normal in our town for parents to leave kids in the play place for an hour or two. Staff watched through the big glass windows, and the restaurant had the kind of familiarity that was supposed to feel safe. But there was always something wrong about that McDonald's. I didn't have the words for it then, but even as a toddler, I could sense it. The air felt thick, heavy, like it pressed down on your chest with the weight of water-soaked blankets. The play place was darker than it had any right to be, even in daylight, as if sunlight refused to enter. The tunnels would creak when no one was inside. The ball pit would ripple as if something had just slid beneath the surface. I remember the first time I saw him. It was a rainy afternoon, the sky bruised and muddy, thunder splitting the clouds above as Simon helped me out of the car. "Just stay in the play place, okay?" he said, brushing water off my jacket. "I'll be next door. Don't talk to strangers." I nodded, half eager to run, half nervous. "Okay," I whispered. The place was nearly empty. A bored teenager behind the counter gave a weak smile before returning to the fryer. I kicked off my shoes and crawled into the structure. The familiar red spirals fogged over windows and worn fabric mats that smelled faintly of old plastic and grease. I was halfway through the tunnel when I heard it. A voice. Pick. A sharp, high-pitched squeal like a squeaky toy buzzing with static. My body froze. I looked behind me. Nothing. "Peekaboo," it whispered again, softer this time. The sound came from the very end of the tunnel, where darkness pooled like ink. I held my breath, heart hammering. Something shifted in the shadows, and then I saw it. A face. Pale, thin, smeared with grime. Ragged tufts of hair stuck out in all directions like dead moss or a squirrel's nest. Its eyes were grotesquely large, cartoonish, almost painted on. It didn't crawl. It snapped forward, face first, like some invisible string yanked it toward me. I screamed, tumbling backward, my elbow smacking the plastic wall as I slid down the slide. The teenager behind the counter didn't even look up. Simon arrived a few minutes later, breathless. I was curled up under a table, sobbing, repeating the same word over and over. "Peekaboo, peekaboo." That was only the beginning. Mom took me to a child psychologist shortly after. She thought the divorce might be affecting me. Dad had officially moved out and we were splitting time between houses. But every time I stayed at Mom's, especially after a visit to that McDonald's, I'd wake up screaming. Sometimes my arms were scratched raw. Once my nose bled so badly the sheets looked like something from a crime scene. I tried to explain to the therapist about him, the figure in the tunnels. "Peekaboo," I said. "He only comes when I'm alone. He lives in tunnels and doorways. He whispers pick until I answer." The therapist wrote it off as an imaginary friend born from trauma and gave Mom a list of bedtime rituals and calming exercises. None of it worked. Not even a little. Worse, I started doing things I don't even remember. Mom and Simon say that whenever we drove past an empty house, I'd whisper, "That's where Peekaboo lives now." Or I'd ring random doorbells and say, "Peekaboo will open the door." I have no memory of it, no recollection at all, but they swore it happened. One night, though I remember everything like it's burned into my mind, Mom let me sleep in the master bedroom while she folded laundry in the living room. I'd been crying for hours, terrified after seeing Peekaboo in the hallway again. She promised to leave the bathroom light on so I wouldn't be scared, but the light didn't matter. I lay there staring at the bathroom door when I felt the air shift. The room went icy, though it was midsummer. The soft hum of the fridge, the dryer, the ceiling fan, even the creaks of the house all faded into a silence so thick it hurt my ears. And then I saw him standing in the doorway, same ragged clothes, same twitchy hands jerking like invisible strings pulled him. But this time he smiled. It was wide. Wrongly wide. Human, but twisted in a way that made your stomach turn. "Peekaboo," he whispered. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then he lunged at me, arms flailing, mouth open like he intended to swallow me whole. That's when I finally screamed, and my voice must have carried because the neighbors called the police. Mom ran in, finding me curled at the edge of the bed, shaking uncontrollably. She rushed me to the hospital thinking it was a seizure, but it wasn't. Things calmed down eventually. After we moved, leaving that house behind, we left the McDonald's on Elmwood too. We went to a newer, cleaner location, one without a play place. I stopped seeing peekaboo. The nightmares faded, the scratches disappeared, but the fear never left me. When I was 10, I asked Mom about the old house, the play place, the strange noises I used to think came from under my bed. She looked at me seriously, more seriously than I'd ever seen. "That house, Ivy," she said, her voice low. "That house wasn't right." I used to hear things too, something breathing beneath the floor, sometimes moaning, sometimes growling. It wasn't just you. I asked her if she ever saw peekaboo. She didn't answer at first, but finally, after a long pause, she nodded. "One time," she whispered. "Just once. I saw something standing in the hallway after midnight. I thought it was you, but it wasn't. I closed my eyes and prayed. When I looked again, it was gone." She paused, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. I haven't been able to walk past a McDonald's play place without feeling sick since then. Last year I went back. I'm in my 20s now, and a part of me, a morbid curiosity I guess, wanted to see it again. The McDonald's was still there, slightly run down. The play place looked smaller now, faded by sun and time. But the moment I stepped inside, that weight returned, heavy and watching. I bought a small coffee and sat by the window, trying to convince myself it was just memory, just nerves. Then I heard it, muffled, high-pitched, scratchy from the plastic tunnel. "Pick." I didn't stay. I don't know what peekaboo is. A ghost, a hallucination, a parasite feeding on grief in a broken family? Maybe some places, play places meant for laughter, hide shadows we aren't supposed to see. All I know is this. If you ever hear a voice in a tunnel whispering, "Pick," don't answer. Because he never really leaves. He's just waiting for someone new to play.